Gears of War is a series deeper than it appears. From the outside, the series might look like a muscle-bound shooter with little to offer but spectacle and explosions. A fast food offering, you could say, in the video game sphere. However, that opinion can only persist for those who haven't played the games. Under its bombastic veneer, the original Gears trilogy offers nuance. The world of Sarah with its various factions is a rough world where moral grayness runs rampant. The characters are bold. Marcus Phoenix and his allies may not be for the faint of heart, but they're rich and layered. The characterization is deliberate and fine-tuned in the quiet moments between explosions. The gameplay systems are rich, and they only grow more impressive the deeper you look into them. Some may wonder upon first glance how this franchise came to define the Xbox 360 era along with Halo. However, with a deeper look, this becomes no mystery at all, and that deeper look is exactly what we're going to do in this retrospective. We're going to dive into each of the Gears of War games in the original trilogy. We're going to see what makes each game special and noteworthy individually, but we're also going to see how the games coalesce into one of gaming's best trilogies and ponder the legacy it leaves. Get settled in because this is going to be a long one. We'll start, of course, with the very first Gears of War. Gears of War is one of the most influential games in history. It popularized an entire genre of games, the third-person cover-based shooter, and it is responsible for the wave of them in the 2000s and 2010s. Many iconic franchises, such as Uncharted, Mass Effect, Ghost Recon, The Division, and so on, would not be what they are today without Gears of War. But there is far more to Gears of War than its game mechanics. The world building and the characters are meticulous. Gears of War doesn't merely set up a single story, but it lays the groundwork for the entire trilogy. Together, these elements create a rich experience that is cohesive in a way that few games are, and an experience that is somehow more than the sum of its parts. So we're going to dive into the world, the story, the gameplay, and see how each of these parts reinforce each other. Equip your Lancer gear, because we're diving in. The story opens with the chapter card. Ashes, 14 years after E-Day. Already, we see the game establishing elements of the world. We know there was some inciting incident E-Day that happened more than a decade ago. Dom releases our main character, Marcus Phoenix, from his prison cell.
What are you doing here?
Getting you out. Here, put this on. You'll need it.
You could get into a lot of trouble for doing this.
Not anymore. Things have changed. We better go.
What about the other prisoners? We can't just leave them here.
They're gone. Hoffman pardoned everybody.
Is that right?
Welcome back to the army, soldier.
This intro is striking, and it does a great job of piquing the player's curiosity. We're left to wonder why exactly Marcus is in prison. There is a backstory to unravel here. Likewise, his release stresses the direness of the situation. Why would you resort to getting help from a prisoner if you had anyone else you could call upon? Dom and Marcus make their way through the prison. Along the way, they stumble across horrors.
Nice.
What the hell's been going on in this prison?
You don't want to know.
This scene does a great job of setting up the tone and atmosphere of the story. It's brutal, with a touch of horror mixed in. Furthermore, the scene is great world building. Marcus is unfazed by the atrocity, implying that he's seen many such things before. It speaks of the prison being a corrupt, broken place, and that branches out to the broader world. Finally, after mounting tension, our heroes encounter their dreaded enemy, the Locusts. Already, we see the cinematic approach this game has to its battles. A raven is flying overhead and a watchtower crumbles. The Locusts emerge from the smoke of the debris. Marcus and Dom fight through the bloodied and harrowed prison as the player gets used to the game's controls. They make their way to the courtyard as something big rumbles underneath them. They manage to board the raven right in the nick of time. A corpser emerges from the earth. The monster is giant, easily dwarfing the chopper. Its appearance is a great way of finishing the introductory chapter. It communicates that this world is bigger than you, badder than you, and something that you will struggle to survive against. Marcus and Dom then link up with Delta Squad.
Where are we going?
Embry Square. Colonel Hoffman's waiting for us.
Hoffman. Oh, shit.
This is gonna be awesome.
Hey! Are you the Marcus Phoenix? The one who fought at Aspio Fields?
Yep.
Wow, cool!
Not really.
The story does a fantastic job of building intrigue around Marcus's character. He already has relationships with many of the characters prior to the player's introduction to him. He has a past that soldiers revere, and this contrasts with his status as a prisoner. Something happened to make him fall from grace. Furthermore, Marcus is very clearly unhappy to see Hoffman. All these questions create an aura of intrigue around Marcus that makes him captivating. Hoffman is waiting for them at the LZ, and his disdain for Marcus compounds the questions about his past.
You! Traitor like you doesn't deserve to wear the uniform.
Looks to me like you need all the help you can get.
Marcus's wry response is satisfying, and is also emblematic of his personality. Marcus Phoenix is a very bold character. You get a pretty strong sense of who he is after just a few lines of dialogue. He's courageous, but he's also hard-headed. He has a very cynical outlook on the world, and this comes through his wry and often cutting sense of humor. He has a strong distaste for authority, and he'll do what he thinks is right, regardless of what his superiors command. It's pretty apparent that this personality is what led him to a prison cell, one way or another. Although this rough, tough guy archetype is fairly common for this genre of story, Phoenix nonetheless stands out as one of gaming's best. His voice is magnetic, and just about every line out of his mouth is memorable. He's a prime example of how important execution is when it comes to characterization. A list of personality attributes is not what makes a character come alive. They come alive in the telling of the story. Hoffman brings good news, but in the Gears universe, nothing comes easy.
We now have the light mass bomb. I'll take out all these bastards with one shot.
Up high!
But it can't work if we don't have the targeting data. That's why we need the resonator.
A weapon to end the war. It sounds great, but in the midst of explosions and gunfire, and with Alpha Squad already missing, the retrieval of the resonators is setting out to be a difficult and brutal affair. Hoffman reluctantly accepts Phoenix's reinstatement. He needs every man at his disposal. Delta Squad heads towards Alpha's last known position. They fight Locust through the city, and it really showcases the bleakness of it all. Gears of War has a compelling atmosphere, and one of the reasons it works so well is because of how wholeheartedly the game commits to its dour and brutal aesthetic. There's nothing ornate about Gears' world. The buildings are short and stubby, built for sturdiness instead of aesthetics. The colors are washed out and grimy, and the game's heavy gore adds to the feel that you're wading through a war zone. The Xbox 360 generation of gaming is criticized for a lack of color, with many games having overly brown color schemes. Gears of War is one of the games that started that trend. However, I think this aesthetic works really well for this game because this muted color palette was deliberately chosen to have a specific effect on the player's mood. You're supposed to feel overwhelmed and oppressed by the colors. I think the main issue with this muted aesthetic, like pretty much any other trend, is that later developers copy it unthinkingly and put it into games where it doesn't quite fit. It leads to overuse and fatigue. The sense of oppression in the game is further enhanced by the game's dabbling in horror. Gears of War plays with pacing, creating slow moments between the chaos that often introduce elements of the unknown, such as pits that descend endlessly or new Locust introductions. It makes you feel like you don't understand the Locust, and it really sells them as a threat not only to your person, but an existential threat to humanity. Even the checkpoint noise adds to this growing sense of dread. When the checkpoint noise tolls, it doesn't feel like a success. It sounds like you're taking yet another step closer to the abyss. Delta Team manages to find a member of Alpha Squad, Augustus Cole, aka the Cole Train. He's alone against a squad of Locusts, yet he's unintimidated. In fact, he taunts the Locusts as you try to save his exposed behind. It's an introduction that summarizes his personality. He's a larger-than-life, ex-pro thrashball player with more energy and enthusiasm than anybody else in the game combined. He's another example of Gears' approach to characterization. The game has a knack for bold personalities that collide with one another. We'll see this again with an upcoming character. With Cole at their side, Delta Squad continues on. They find a Hammer of Dawn. It's an awesome weapon, both in power and concept. It's a designator that summons a laser from space to strike its target. Yeah, it's as cool as it sounds. It's the one true power trip weapon in the game. When you have a Hammer of Dawn, you finally feel like the odds are in your favor. Unfortunately, the weapon is situational. It can only be used outdoors, and when the satellites are overhead. And with that in mind, it's a bit inconvenient to be warring against an enemy that loves the underground. There's a moment here that I love between Marcus and Dom.
What's all this shit about Hoffman's operation and his resonator?
It'll map the underground network. Then we can find the Locust Heart and rip it out.
First off, this scene shows the bond between them. Marcus doesn't trust Hoffman's opinion, so he asks his friend about the mission. Also, his answer of a cynical is my favorite. It does a lot of storytelling lifting for what's merely an utterance. It tells of his overall skepticism of the leadership, and it speaks to how he's heard the same old type of story time over time, and it's never led anywhere. It's an economy of storytelling moment that says a lot about him, but also a lot about the world. Delta receives a transmission from Alpha Squad.
Where the hell are you guys? Man! Oh shit, man, where you been?
Delta Squad is in the House of Sovereigns. Over.
Well, that's great. We're pinned down by troikas on your rooftop. Over.
It's Damon Baird, another mainstay in the series. Already, we see hints of another bold personality, but I'll discuss him more in a second. Delta clears an evac zone for Baird and the rest of Alpha Team. It's a somber reunion, as Cole tells Baird about the death of one of their comrades. It's clear that death pervades this universe. The Gears are ambushed by Locust, and here we have the emergence of the game's primary antagonist, General Ram. And man, this is an iconic introduction. Ram saunters through the chaos, pointing out Kim. He savagely executes him. Without any words, it establishes exactly the type of character Ram is. He's a beast that revels in bloodshed. In the background, there is a woman speaking about the Locust's strategy. I'll talk more about her at the end of the game. With the leader of Delta's untimely death, and the Locust horde converging on the survivors, they seek shelter inside a tomb. Marcus contacts Control and discusses next steps. Anya directs them to a nearby courtyard for their best chances at escape. Baird immediately confronts Marcus and sizes him up. Baird, like the rest of the characters, has a very strong personality. He's a mechanical genius, but he's also vain. In addition, he's whiny, confrontational, and easily agitated. This makes him a fantastic foil against the rest of the squad. He contrasts well against the stoic natures of Dom and Marcus, as well as Cole's breezy and easygoing attitude. Despite his negative character traits, which generally come across as unlikable in games, I found myself really growing to like Baird. Maybe it's because the game is pretty self-aware of how annoying Baird can be, and he's often the butt of the joke for the rest of the squad. Marcus especially likes making fun of him, and his presence really makes the squad's dynamic gel together. The squad finds themselves hunted by a new Locust threat, a Berserker. As I mentioned earlier, the game really plays with a horror tone here, amping up the tension before the squad encounters it. The fight with the Berserker marks the end of Act 1. Traditional weapons won't hurt the beast, so Marcus has to lure it outside in order to use the Hammer of Dawn. It's not the most complex encounter in the world, with you just having to lead the Berserker to breakable walls and dodge roll its charges. Nonetheless, it serves as a really good change of pace from fighting the traditional Locust horde. Furthermore, it serves as a suitable climax to the act. Once the Berserker is taken care of, Marcus reconvenes with Control. With the Resonator secure, Hoffman gives them new orders. They have a secondary target, and they are to deploy the Resonator in the Lethia Emulsion factory. Baird is stressed about packing up before nightfall hits, and we'll soon see why. Marcus is promoted, and this offends Baird. Then to make things worse, Dom announces he has a plan, which Baird is further miffed by. It's funny to see how his ego is wounded because Dom came up with the plan instead of him, and it's something he won't drop.
I got an idea.
Oh, yeah? What is it, smart guy? Enough. Plan? What plan? You don't have a plan? You're just talking shit. Plan.
Just wait and see, asshole.
It's these sorts of dynamics which really make the squad come alive. The squad battles through the ruined city as dusk approaches. Now is a good time to dive more into the gameplay of Gears. Gameplay-wise, Gears of War is so close to perfect. There is a reason it popularizes an entire genre of shooters. Even so many years later, this game still stands ahead above most of its descendants. What makes Gears click so well isn't just one particular thing, but rather how each of the finer details of gameplay all work so well together. First off, there is just a crunchy and tactile feel to everything. Marcus has great mobility, with a powerful dodge roll and the ability to slide quickly into cover. However, there is still a great sense of momentum and weight to him. The way he enters cover with a decided thwack, and the way his body slams into the ground with each roll. This tactile feedback carries over to the weapons. All of them feel very crunchy and mechanical, with very satisfying clicks and clacks when you reload. The gore and dismemberment systems make them feel even more powerful. Your enemies, though, are far from pushovers. Even on easier difficulties, the Locusts have a lot of health and do pretty high damage. This has a notable impact on the game's flow. One of the common criticisms of third-person shooters is that they have a boring gameplay loop. Hug a piece of cover, and peek out and shoot until the enemy is dead. It's very passive and slow. In Gears though, this isn't how fights play out. The Locusts are aggressive, yet they also know how to use cover. This means one of two things often happens. First, the aggressive Locusts charge and flush you out of position. Alternatively, the Locusts hide behind cover and poke at you. Because the drones have high health, shooting at them from behind cover is not super effective. In both of these cases, the game is encouraging you to change up position. You're encouraged to get good flanks on drones, which is a more effective way of taking them out. Then, because you're also being forced out of cover in turn, it results in an overall great sense of movement and flow to fights. Here is where level design plays a big factor. The combat zones throughout the game are specifically designed to foster this dynamic flank or B-flank type of gameplay. Emergence holes often spawn, which means Locusts will come from a different direction, and you're therefore required to reposition once again. My point is that cover isn't merely passive protection. In Gears, it truly is your #1 strategic tool. What this means furthermore is that the game can really foster diversity in its fights by altering the map design. Changing up the positioning of cover and enemy emplacements such as turrets really does alter how you navigate certain combat encounters. One of the common criticisms I've heard about this game is its lack of enemy variety. On one hand, it's true. There are only a small handful of enemy types, with the drones, wretches, and boomers being the primary foes you fight. However, the variety created by the differing enemy compositions and map layouts made this so I didn't view the enemy variety as a problem. I didn't get sick of fighting the Locusts, and I always look forward to the next skirmish. There's room to grow in this area for certain, and this is something the sequels do address. There are smaller touches too, which really add to the gameplay experience. One of my favorites is the active reload system. When reloading your weapons, there's a meter with a perfect marker. If you time your reload well, you can reload faster than you otherwise would. If you time your reload perfectly, your weapon is temporarily powered up. However, if you mistime your reload, there's a jam animation that you need to wait for. The system is great for a number of reasons. First off, as the name suggests, the system makes reloading a more active action than just hitting a button. It makes you feel more connected to your weapon. Furthermore, because each weapon has a distinct timing window, it adds to the sense of identity each one has. Furthermore, the system adds a sense of mastery to weapons. Initially, you may mistime reloads or very rarely get a perfect reload. Then you may get perfect reloads consistently. After enough time with the weapon, you may not even need to look at the meter to gauge the timing. As a result, your DPS goes up, and it's a very rewarding way to feel like you're improving. Perhaps the best part is how it adds tension to the gunfights. If enemies are on you, you may try to get a perfect reload and mess up, jamming your weapon. It's a very cinematic sort of tension that adds to that feeling that you're playing out a scene from a movie, if that makes sense. The weapons, like the enemy variety, are few. However, their individual mechanics are varied and satisfying enough to not get stale for the length of a playthrough. Still, it's another area for growth. So in my mind, Gears' gameplay is nearly perfect. There is one huge flaw which we'll get to shortly. Let's get back to the story. After being prompted from Cole, Dom finally divulges his plan.
I could use a hand here. We gotta get out of here. Now, if you got a plan, let's hear it.
I know somebody who lives out here. He's got a vehicle. It's a piece of crap junker, but it runs.
What? You know one of these stranded guys?
Yeah, there's a camp up ahead.
So, what? You hang out with stranded?
I don't hang out, dickwad. I'm looking for somebody.
Shut up, Baird. Keep moving. What I said?
Dom is pretty cryptic about this person he's looking for. Like with Marcus, this touching on his backstory adds an air of mystery and depth to him. He has a life beyond the confines of the immediate story. Furthermore, this is setting up narrative elements which will be addressed in sequels. As I touched on in the intro, I appreciate the story's confidence in setting up narrative elements which will have payoffs much later on. They reach the stranded encampment. There is some great world building here. At the sight of the Gears, the stranded lock up their stores and homes. They have as much suspicion of the Gears as Baird has for them. It further builds the world as a place where humans are still divided, even in the midst of an existential threat. Dom calls in a favor and retrieves keys for the vehicle they need, but he and Marcus need to fetch it. They leave the others behind, ignoring the protestations of Baird. A new threat emerges pretty quickly: the Krill. They're bat-like creatures that prey upon humans in the dark. so Marcus and Dom have to remain near light sources in order to survive. This changes how you have to navigate the map. Oftentimes, areas are inaccessible until you blow up propane tanks littered around. This is a great example of the map variety I touched upon earlier. The change in the environment does change how you have to play. Unfortunately, this segment of the game also exposes its biggest flaw, which is why I waited until now to talk about it. The friendly AI in this game is pretty bad. Dom will actively walk into danger with the awareness of a weathered rock. Unfortunately, your allies have limited health, and if they go down, you have to revive them. Because they die in horrible spots, you often get killed having to run where they are. And this Krill segment is just the worst for this problem. In this playthrough I didn't get any good clips, but when playing this game in the past, I had times where Dom ran into the dark and got killed by the Krill over and over again, and because he was in the dark, I couldn't run in to save him. This problem isn't quite frequent enough to be game ruining, but it happens often enough to be very frustrating. It's pretty much the only thing in the game that I feel like was a big oversight. The Gears reach the vehicle and fuel it up. There's a segment where you drive on a highway, fending off Krill with a UV light. It's another good change of pacing. Overall, the game has a really good feel for when to give players a break from the traditional cover-to-cover shooting. They return to the Stranded camp, just in time to help the Stranded against the Locust attack. After the enemy has been repelled, the Gears finally move on to the mining facility, marking an end to Act 2. I love the atmosphere at the beginning of Act 3. The rain is heavy, and the lightning is so loud it sears your ears. These create an even more dour and ominous vibe than before. Unfortunately, the entrance to the facility is blocked, so the Gears split up to find a way in. They encounter a new enemy, Lambent wretches. These guys have a spookier look than the originals, with glowing mouths and they explode. Other than that, they're not too different to fight. The tension grows as they make their way around the abandoned facility with creepy screams arising.
You know that nobody's been underground in years, right?
I know.
Look, man, it's enemy territory. I mean, it's bad enough when we're fighting these things outside, in broad daylight. But underground? In the dark?
Yeah, could be bad. But hey, don't tell Baird that. He's scared shitless as it is.
This is another segment where the game employs horror tactics to put the player on edge. The Gears really feel the tension too. They are uncomfortable with the idea of going underground. That is the Locust's playground, and they already struggle enough with them as it is. I love Marcus's matter-of-factness. Yeah, it could be bad, is such a nonchalant response, and he still sneaks in a way of making fun of Baird. The banter of Delta is what really sells the squad for me. They find a way inside, and they encounter a miner who is waiting for rescue. Unfortunately, the Gears need his help. He is very reluctant to do so. He just wants to leave this place.
Relax, will you?
You relax. You Gears all suck. Bunch of bloodthirsty fascist pigs.
He is not a fan of the Gears either. His dislike for them, along with the Strandeds, helps paint a picture of the COG's overall reception. They are not very popular with the masses. Gears of War is really good at weaving world building into moments like these, hinting at the larger world without delving into too much exposition. Unfortunately, the miner is not long for this world. He falls into a pit and is eaten by wretches. Delta continues on without their guide. They make their way underground to the Emulsion mine. This is one of the most unique and interesting locations in the game. The glowing, bubbling pools of yellow emulsion make the mine a lot brighter than you would expect. The dark rocks contrast nicely with it and creates a nice color balance. The stalagmites and the stalactites are oppressively large. Their silhouettes stand out against the glowing liquid, and they resemble sharp teeth. I love the thematic unity here. The Gears are descending into Locust home territory, and they are surrounded by imagery of the jaws of a beast. It just works well. Overall, the game has a surprising amount of variety to its environments, given the limited color palette it employs. The colors are muted, with browns and grays predominant, yet there is still a lot of expressiveness and variety to the environments. From the war-torn city, to the ominous and moody thunderstorm facility, to the predatory vibes of the Emulsion factory, Gears has a lot of its world to show you. A lot of games fall into one of two camps. Either there is so much visual variety that the world doesn't feel cohesive, or everything is so samey that it becomes boring. Gears of War's art direction finds the perfect middle ground. The world feels like a single cohesive whole. I'm always eager to visit the next area because I know something interesting and different awaits. The Gears' progress is quickly halted by the appearance of a corpser. This is the monster we saw in the game's opening, so it's a nice full circle moment to get to fight it here. The battle isn't anything too special. Shoot the belly to expose the mouth, then shoot the mouth. Wretches join the fray to give you more to contend with, but it's all overall still a simple affair. You finish the fight by forcing the Corpser onto a platform, then shooting off its support hinges. The Corpser plummets into the Emulsion. When they continue, even the gears can't help being amazed by how much Emulsion is in the mine.
Look at all that juice. Hey, Marcus, how much do you think all that emulsion's worth? I don't think I can count that high.
In addition to being pretty and visually interesting, the game is using the environments to foster world building. From the Gears' dialogue, it's clear that this emulsion is valuable, and this is reinforced by the giant refinement factory we had previously traveled through. The humans in Gears' world put a lot of resources into mining emulsion. They plant the resonator and escape the mine. A job well done, right?
What do you mean it didn't work?
I mean that lousy resonator didn't deliver the goods. According to Anya, we're missing data on, hell, I don't know, most of the network. We need 100 resonators to map these tunnels.
Fortunately though, Baird stumbles upon a geobot that has all of the targeting data they need. This does feel a little too coincidental and easy. However, the contrived nature of this plot point is offset by the intrigue of the geobot's origin. It came from the house of none other than Marcus's dad. It's an unexpected and interesting development, and it powers the story onward. Meanwhile, we see General Ram in the underground caverns, executing a COG soldier. He's still really intimidating, but I kept waiting for there to be a scene that fleshed him out a bit further. They head to the East Barricade Academy, where the Phoenix estate is. However, the squad has to ground the Raven due to Nemesis in flight. They make the rest of the journey on foot, fighting through Locust troops. This fourth act really cranks the combat to the next level, hitting you against higher concentrations of enemies. It feels like a solid progression given the player's increasing familiarity with the mechanics, and it syncs with the story's build-up. There's another Berserker encounter which plays out like the first. You eventually lead it to a greenhouse, where there's an open roof. Since it's not an entirely open area like the first go-around, you have to bait the Berserker into an open area to use the Hammer of Dawn. It's a good reuse of the mechanics while adding a little bit more difficulty, and it is another nice change of pace from the intense shooting of this act. The gears eventually make it to the estate. Baird spots an APC behind the house, which they can use to exfil. It's broken down though, but he thinks he can fix it. Phoenix orders them to remain outside, getting the APC running, while he and Dom head into the mansion to search for intel. Inside, they're met with Locust drones. One thing I find interesting is that as they travel through the estate, Marcus doesn't really make any comments on his parents or childhood. He's not really a guy for nostalgia or reflection. They locate a hidden entrance to a secret lab. When Jack taps into the computer, they find something shocking.
Doesn't seem possible. They're camping these in the tunnels. It's a honeycomb. The planet's crust is riddled with them. They're everywhere.
I take it that qualifies as enough data to get the job done?
All Marcus is interested in is that they have their targeting data. There are still a lot of questions about his father. How did his dad get this data, and why is it holed up in a lab? These questions aren't answered in the game. Like the mystery person Dom is searching for, the game is teeing up mysteries for future titles to address. Delta holds out desperately as Jack uploads the data they need. They book it out of the mansion and just barely make it to their APC, with a Brumac in pursuit. They board the train, at the front of which sits the lightmass bomb. They must get the targeting data to it. Unfortunately, an entire train infested with a locust stand between them. I really like this setting. The sky is alien and ominous, with Nemesis ink blotting out the sunlight. This has story implications too. A Berserker boards the train, but Delta can't use the Hammer of Dawn due to the obstructed sky. Instead, you can dispatch the Berserker in a few ways. You can either lure it onto a platform and detach it from the rest of the train, or you can lure it near fuel tanks and blow them up. I'm glad that for the third appearance of the Berserker, the game forces you to do something different than just nuke it with the hammer again. They push through train cars, making their way past various obstacles, and the fighting is suitably intense. The developers managed to capture a very kinetic feel, with the train cars showering sparks, and it really adds a sense of movement and urgency as the story's climax approaches. At the front of the train, General Ram awaits. He is surrounded by Krill, and with the murky sky as his backdrop, he's never looked more intimidating. Unfortunately, looking cool has been General Ram's only shtick for the entire game. I feel like there was a missed opportunity to do more with him. The boss fight, although cinematic, is pretty underwhelming. He essentially just walks slowly at you and shoots you, sometimes dispatching the Krill to attack. That isn't to say the fighting is easy though. Dom sure loves to die in this fight, right next to Ram, forcing you to make some pretty stupid maneuvers to save him. That's when playing on an easier difficulty too. I've seen footage of this fight on Insane, and while that's certainly not something I would like to do. Despite Ram's challenge, the Gears manage to beat him and set off a light mass bomb. The game ends pretty shortly thereafter. There isn't a resolution scene with the Gears. This feels fitting though. As we saw with Marcus at his father's estate, he's not a man for reflection. He gets the job done, and well, that's about it. As the Raven flies away, Hoffman gives a motivational speech about their success, so things seem to be ending on a very uplifting note.
This war has exacted a heavy price from others. It has torn our world apart. But you have my word that we will rise again.
However, this is undercut by the following speech. A woman speaks to the Locust, the same woman who spoke during Ram's introduction.
They do not understand. They do not know why we wage this war. Why we cannot stop. Will not stop. Why we will fight and fight and fight. Until we win. Or we die. And we are not dead yet.
Her speech is really interesting. She says the humans do not know why they fight, which adds a great level of intrigue to the Locust. Throughout the game, they have appeared to be bloodthirsty monsters, so the idea that more complex motivations compel them is really interesting. It's clear that this mysterious woman is an even greater threat than Ram. We'll come to know her as Queen Mira. Overall, I would say that the game's ending is great for the first entry in a series. It manages to be satisfying enough on its own, yet it leaves you with a ton of questions that make you hunger for a sequel. Who is Dom looking for? Why was Marcus in prison? What's up with his dad? What are the Locusts really fighting for? These are just a handful of questions that the story asks, yet leaves open for subsequent games. This first game created an ample foundation, with enough world building to create a rich and fully realized world, yet it left enough room for sequels to flourish in their own right. In summary then, Gears of War is one of those few games that feels like the true start of a franchise. Like the original Halo, it's a game that leaves you floored, yet also leaves you wondering about the greater world and larger story at play. Gears of War is certainly not a perfect game. There are issues with the AI mechanics, Ram could have been more developed, and the final fight was underwhelming. However, these flaws become so tiny and insignificant in comparison to the successes of the game. The story is interesting, with a cast of characters that truly burst through the screen, managing to feel both bombastic and alive. The world is fully realized through stellar art design and the great weaving of exposition throughout. Finally, the gameplay is a masterpiece, standing at the top of its class almost 20 years later, and virtually birthing an entire genre. It's one of those games I appreciate more and more as the years go by. It's one of those games, I think, that is immune to the effects of time, and it stands as one of the most influential in the medium's history. Gears of War 2 had big shoes to fill. How do you follow up the very first Gears of War, a seminal title that came to define the Xbox 360 era? It was a game that already had such rich world building, storytelling, characters, and gameplay. When the bar is set so high, even reaching it can seem insurmountable, let alone rising above it. Fortunately, the first game did a lot to set up its sequel. Although the world building is rich, the first game only explored a small sample of it. As far as the story goes, there are even more unknowns. There are untold pasts of Marcus, his father, and Dom. Furthermore, the first game's ending indicated that there's a lot more to the Locust than it initially appeared. One of the most difficult parts of creating sequels is finding the right direction to head. The first game, by setting up all these questions, provided its sequel a path to go down. However, having a direction and executing on it are two very different things. If Gears of War 2 didn't build upon these questions in a satisfying way and weave them into a unique plot of its own, the groundwork of its predecessor would have been for nothing. The question is, did Gears of War 2 make good on the potential that the first game established? Did it evolve the series? To both of these questions, the answer is yes, an unequivocal yes. Gears of War 2 is the prime example of how to make an amazing sequel. Gears 2 takes the already polished gameplay of its predecessor and evolves it, filling in the gaps and issues with the mechanics, and adding its own unique innovations that feel foundational for the series. The game's story hits the ground running and doesn't stop until the credits roll. All the while, it continues the stellar world building and fills out more of Sarah. In the process, the player bonds even more with the stellar characters. You could make a strong argument that Gears of War 2 is the magnum opus of not only the Gears franchise, but Xbox's first-party catalog of games as well. So let's dive into Gears of War 2's campaign and see what makes this installment so amazing. Queen Mira sets the stage for the story.
It began, as always, with the desire for power.
She's intimidating and confident in the Locust's upcoming victory. She has reason to be. Humans have been pushed back to the city of Jacinto, which serves as their very last defense. When she speaks of their defeat, there's a trace of pity within her voice. Nonetheless, she is resolved in her mission. She believes the humans have brought this war upon themselves.
In a way, I pity them. But humanity, as always, brought this war upon itself.
This is intriguing, and it naturally makes the audience wonder about the backstory behind this war. I like how Gears of War 2 begins how the first game ended, with this speech from Queen Mira. It's a nice transition that really makes the second game feel like it's picking up right where the first left off. When the game moves on to our heroes, the first thing we see is wounded soldiers on stretchers being wheeled into the hospital. The sight is a reinforcement of Queen Mira's words. Humanity is on the back foot, with their numbers thinning every day. Anya remarks that the Locusts are growing bolder every day. Jacinto may be humanity's last stronghold, but even it isn't safe from the enemy. The clumsy Benjamin Carmine arrives, the newest member of Delta. He's the brother of the ill-fated Anthony Carmine from the first game. The Carmine family becomes a running part of the series, with its members often biting the bullet in the line of duty. Will Ben Carmine be an exception? Well, we'll see. He's a very green recruit, which comes across from his nervousness and clumsiness. Marcus has the option of training him, or letting the young Carmine figure things out on the go. This is a clever way of weaving the tutorial into the narrative. Marcus gives Carmine his first assignment.
Welcome to Jacinto, Private. Your first order is to guard this spot. You stay here until we get back from patrol.
But sir, there's nothing here to guard.
Sounds like a good first assignment to me. Stay put. We'll be back, kid.
It's nice to see that the war hasn't tainted Marcus's wry sense of humor. Through the smarminess of his words, though, there's an undercurrent of protectiveness for the young Carmine. Marcus knows he isn't ready to go on patrol. Not just yet. Marcus, especially in this game, displays a protectiveness for his men. When they enter the hospital, sirens start to go off. The grubs are attacking the facility. The fact that they're striking a hospital, a place which symbolizes rest and recovery, really underscores how vulnerable humanity is. They're never safe, not from the Locust. Anya tells Dom that she has a lead on his Jane Doe. Dom nearly snaps when Anya hangs up.
Damn it! I'm gonna kill these goddamn grubs.
There's a change in Dom from the first game. Before, he was always calm and collected. He was a tempering force, offsetting the bombasticness of Cole, the agitated nature of Baird, and Marcus's stubborn headstrongness. Here, though, we see just how much the search for his wife has worn him down. It's a bit of off-screen character change that I think works well. They rendezvous with Ty, a fierce warrior who has a presence, even in his introduction cinematic. Gears of War has a knack for establishing characters with bold personalities, and Ty is no exception. They continue on to repel the invaders. Marcus is perplexed by the raid. The Locusts are outnumbered, so it's essentially a suicide run.
Maybe they're just desperate.
What do you mean?
Maybe the light mass bomb hit them harder than we thought. Or maybe something else is going down in the hollow. I don't know.
Marcus's ponderings are a good reinforcement of Queen Mira's statement. The first game ended with her saying that humanity doesn't understand the Locust or why they fight. Having Marcus realize that a piece of the puzzle is missing, and that the Locust might be operating off of different parameters than the COG assumed, is subtly planting seeds for future revelations. There is more great storytelling to be found in the hospital. The squad passes by patients who have some affliction known as rust lung. Notes in the hospital speak of patients showing signs of increased aggression and paranoia. Beyond this, the hospital's imagery is intense. Operating rooms are entirely splattered with blood. Signs of surgeries far messier than they ought to be. Hospital beds too are covered in blood. The hospital didn't have the time or the staff in order to keep the place clean. It's run down and on the verge of collapse, even without the help from the Locust in doing so. This first level then successfully establishes that feeling of decay and disorder which is emblematic of the war effort. The Gears encounter their mortal enemy, and they set up an ambush and drive them out of the hospital. The fighting moves onto the streets, where we see similar signs of disorder. Buildings are on fire, and many which aren't still smoke from prior blazes. Rusted and broken cars pile up on the sides of the road. Some of this mess was caused by the current Locust attack, sure, but certainly not all of it. After the Locusts are defeated, Dom finally gets to hear from Anya news about his wife.
The Jane Doe I mentioned? She fits the description, but... well, looks like she was released a few days ago. We don't have any info after that.
There's gotta be another lead or something, right?
I'm sorry, Dom. That's it. I'm sorry.
Damn it! Not again! I've lost her again! Ah!
This setback, even more so than the scene earlier, demonstrates Dom's mental state. His reaction is understandable, certainly, but it's not indicative of a well-composed person. He's a man that's frustrated, weary, and just about at the end of his rope. We also see a gentler side of Marcus here. He speaks softly, and he gives Dom the space he needs to process his grief.
Yeah, whatever you need. Guys, let's go.
As I touched on earlier, he really comes across as the protector of his squad in this game. So then, the scene is working double time to develop Marcus and Dom. When I discussed the first game, I talked about how the game used the economy of storytelling really well for characterization, often using a single scene to develop multiple characters simultaneously. A similar technique is used here in the sequel. The COG mobilize to take the fight to the Locust, and Chairman Prescott gives them a rallying speech. The speech underscores that humanity, even beyond the Locust, has problems. Humanity is violent and ever-warring in this world. Despite this, his rallying cry is convincing. He casts the mission to strike the Locusts at their hearts before they can destroy humanity as the most vital mission humanity has ever taken.
Soldiers of the COG, my fellow Gears, go forth and bring back the hope of humanity!
The soldiers that have been grinding in the war machine for over a decade with no end in sight, putting an end to the war is incredibly motivating. After feeling small and insignificant, the idea of actually making a concrete difference is powerful. It's a great speech that pumps up both the COG in-world as well as the player. When the COG deploy, we see Dom staring at a picture of his wife. This reinforces his mental state. Despite the importance of the imminent battle, his mind remains solely on his wife. The Gears set out in massive rigs, which their drivers have all named.
Oh yeah, name's Dizzy. And my rig's a little sweet thing, Betty. You a conscript? I ain't got no choice once he took the lifeboat assistance. Family got the groceries, but Daddy got conscripted.
In this small interaction, the game continues to world build. We learn that the COG is offering shelter to refugees, but only if they conscript. It shows the desperation of the COG and how they are willing to get their hands on new recruits by any means necessary. I think the reason the Gears world feels so rich and well realized in the games is because of how no idle moment is wasted. Either the imagery that surrounds you or the casual conversations between Gears go towards fostering more of the world. Speaking of worlds, this chapter showcases the wilderness of Sarah. Since the first game took place mostly in urban environments and emulsion mines, being able to experience the more rural side of the planet is truly exciting. The scenery creates an impressive sense of scale. The rock walls positively tower over you. The trees are tiny from our perspective, which sells the width of the valley. The mountains climb high just past it, and together they create a sweeping sensation. Overall, it sells a lack of control and mastery to this place. Sarah may be humanity's home, but it's not your playground. This wild wilderness sets the game's tone for exploration and discovery, and it makes the player excited to venture forth into this world. This sense of scale extends to the COG derricks. These things are massive. When the fighting starts up, Marcus can only watch as mortars rain down, and reavers come to attack the vehicles. This reinforces his powerlessness, and it's a reminder that no matter how much gumption Delta Squad has, they are still merely a group of soldiers. As they fight on, the sheer number of Locust troops they run into is truly impressive. In the first game, we mainly experienced the war through smaller skirmishes, so bearing witness to a great battle like this captures the feeling of being in a war. Scale plays a massive part in Gears 2's world building and visual storytelling, so I will continue to talk about it. Aside from great visuals and vistas, this level has some pretty cool combat segments. Amidst the chaos, Locust drones try to board the rigs and seize them. You have to fight them off your rig as well as protect your sister rigs. The Gears eventually make it to their destination, the town of Landown. Here they encounter a new enemy called Tickers. The Tickers blow up the rig behind Deltas. Ty was aboard that rig, but he managed to escape unscathed. The game is establishing how tough of a guy he is, as Marcus comments.
Marcus, is that Ty?
Yeah, told you he was tough to kill. Let's get down there, Gears.
This is more setting up for story elements later. The Gears disembark the rig. They need to clear the town, mainly of the Tickers, so that the rigs have safe passage. After some tough fighting, they reach the drill zone. They fend off a heavy Locust attack as grind lifts are being prepared to drill into the earth. Before setting out, Dom makes Marcus promise that he'll look for Maria if something happens to him. We see just how much her loss is consuming him. Even amidst the harrowing battles he just endured, he can't think of anything else except for her. Another wave of Locusts arrives, this time led by Scourge. He has a very intimidating design, and he establishes his power by destroying a Centaur tank single-handedly. In fact, this cutscene is very reminiscent of General Ram's introduction. He's an elite level Locust, whose presence alone is reason to flee. The Gears hurry up and board the grind lifts. Ty and Dizzy find themselves fighting off Scourge. Marcus tries to unlock his harness to help, but it's stuck. The grind lift burrows into the hollow. Marcus and the audience are left to wonder whether they survived. When Marcus and Dom land in the hollows, they link up with Carmine.
Sarge, I made it!
Rook, you did good.
I like how kind and encouraging Marcus is to the rookie here. It reinforces his natural leadership qualities. They continue fighting through the hollow, assisting their fellow Gears along the way. This is a very combat-oriented chapter of the campaign, so it's a good time to dive into Gears 2's gameplay. Because the core combat in the first Gears of War was just about perfect, the sequel focuses on two things: refinement and expansion. Let's start with refinement. The movement in Gears 2 feels buttery smooth. Apparently, the developers made dozens of tweaks to the cover system. I can't individually point any of these tweaks out, but I did notice a net improvement. This is impressive because honestly, I thought the cover system in the first game was already great as is. In Gears 2, Marcus pretty much always does exactly what I intended him to, which is an impressive feat. Cover systems can be notoriously finicky in games. There are also a couple new base abilities. My favorite is the new meat shield mechanic, where you can pick up a downed Locust drone and use them as well a meat shield. You can use your pistol while holding them. So in addition to being a cool mechanic in of itself, I feel like it gives secondary weapons more of a place within the gameplay. I actually use the snub pistol sometimes in Gears 2, where I pretty much never touched it in the first game. You can also chainsaw duel enemies, which is a really cinematic feature, and it adds to the feeling that you're playing an epic action movie. However, the best refinement Gears 2 makes by a long shot is the friendly AI. In Gears 1, my biggest frustration was just how often Dom would go down. I felt like the babysitter of a toddler sometimes, instead of feeling like I was fighting alongside a warrior. In the sequel, your allies go down far less frequently. When they die, their deaths generally make sense too. For instance, a bunch of Tickers will blow up by you and Dom, or you'll be caught in the open and he'll get mowed down by two grinders with mulchers. It's far less of you and Dom fighting a single squad and him blindingly charging forward and eating all of the bullets. What's great too is that allies can revive you now. This makes the relationship feel a lot more reciprocal. Instead of feeling like you're a chaperone, you feel like comrades who are equally helping each other out. All in all, these changes really help you become more immersed in the story and the characters you're fighting aside. However, although this system is greatly improved, there is still definitely room for improvement. Although allies can revive you, they're not great at it. There were a number of times I spammed the revive request button, but Dom ignored me even when he was only a couple feet away. This too is very frustrating, but these occurrences were far less frequent, and if I died, well, I made a mistake in the first place. So Gears 2 makes a lot of great refinements. However, its biggest strides for the franchise are how it expands the gameplay sandbox. Gears 2 introduces a host of new weapons. What's great is that the additions aren't merely new assault rifles or shotguns. The new arrivals offer genuinely different gameplay. There is a new classification of heavy weapons, consisting of the Mulcher and Mortar. These weapons slow your movement speed, and they're best used when mounting them on cover. The Mulcher offers incredible sustained damage to offset the movement penalties. The Mortar is an even more unique addition. You hold down the trigger, which increases the distance the mortars go. You're given a numerical measurement of how far the barrage will go, but you don't have a visual aid. As such, there's a certain level of guesswork with the mortar, and you have to develop a feel for it. Because of this, it feels like such a different beast in comparison to the rest of the arsenal. The Gorgon is a cool secondary machine pistol that feels like it adequately fills out the secondary lineup. My favorite addition though is the flamethrower. This is another close range option that might not be as punchy as the shotgun, but it's nonetheless excellent for blind firing and clearing rooms. Because all of these weapons feel so different to play with, it injects the gameplay with so much variety. Launching mortars at hordes of locusts feels far different than clearing rooms with the flamethrower. The same injection of variety goes for the enemy types. The enemies you fought in Gears 1 were limited, but you can't say the same for Gears 2. There are so many additions, from the tickers to the grinders to the blood mounts. Even the reavers are regular ground enemies now. I'm not going to dissect every single enemy type, but similar to the weapons, they aren't just cosmetic additions. When fighting a legion of maulers armed with shields and maces, you have to change up your strategy in comparison to when a bunch of tickers are scuttling towards you. Likewise, their presence makes the weapon sandbox even more relevant. For instance, let's take the flamethrower. I found it to be one of the most effective weapons against the reavers, able to melt them super quickly. However, when you're faced with shielded maulers, the flamethrower might be harder to use. You can't burn them down fast enough before one of them slams you with their mace. The point being, the weapons and enemies create a positive feedback loop where the developers can mix and match them to create a series of unique gameplay encounters. So with both the expansion and refinements in mind, is Gears 2 a universal improvement over its predecessor? Well, not quite. There's one area where I notice Gears 2 takes a different design approach than its predecessor. The combat encounters in Gears 2 are much more front to back oriented. What do I mean by this? Well, specifically, a lot of combat areas are designed as corridors, with enemies coming directly in front of you. This contrasts with the first entry. In Gears 1, combat areas were designed more like arenas, with many of them being circular. Emergent holes were used to spawn enemies at various points, forcing you to rotate around the map. In comparison, emergent holes are almost entirely absent in Gears 2. They appear in only a few missions. In Gears 1, they appeared in just about every one. This design approach gives Gears 2 a greater feeling of forward momentum. You're always pushing forward, always going deeper and deeper into enemy territory, so it's fitting for the story. However, I personally find this encounter design less interesting than the first game. Gears 1 had a flanker be flanked feel to its fights. You would rotate around, flanking your enemies, and you would have to rotate as they flanked you. You were much more on the move, and this was facilitated further by the emergence holes. It often wasn't viable to hug a single piece of cover during a whole fight. In Gears 2, I find myself crouching behind the same piece of cover for far longer than in Gears 1. It's much more viable to just camp in one spot and mow down the opposition. Of course, there are still linear shootouts in Gears 1, and arenas in Gears 2, but the distribution feels reversed. In other words, I guess, it feels like Gears 1 did more with its limited toolbox to create variety. If Gears 2 had the same limited enemies and weapons, it would play far less interesting than the first title. However, the sheer size of Gears 2's toolbox does result at the end of the day in a far greater sense of variety. The map design may not naturally flush the player out, but a horde of clickers certainly will. Furthermore, although Gears 2's encounters are more linear, that's not to say there isn't variety in how they're constructed. Gears 2 has a more expansive set of interesting set pieces and gameplay elements, which all inject a unique and memorable flair to fights. For instance, fighting the Locusts off as they try to pirate the massive derricks, or raining mortars down upon the horde to create a safe zone to deploy the grindless. There are many amazing battles and set pieces in Gears 2, and I will continue to point them out as we proceed through the game. All in all though, it's impossible to overstate just how much of an improvement Gears 2's combat is over its predecessor. It takes an amazing formula, and it evolves it into such a robust package that it somehow makes the first game feel quaint in comparison. Because there is so much fighting in the game, well, it's a darn good thing. Speaking of fighting, let's return to the story as our Gears battle through the Hollow. As they fight, there is something rumbling deep within these caves. Delta needs to discover the source. They run into a creature known as a rockworm. With their hard exterior and hip height, they serve as the perfect cover. The worms are attracted to glowing fruit that hang from the cavern ceilings, and you can shoot them down to get the worms to move. In effect, they serve as a pretty creative form of mobile cover throughout the levels. As I just talked about, this is one of the ways Gears 2 leverages a unique level attribute to foster gameplay variety. Eventually, they find the source of the seismic activity. There is a giant riftworm, so large that it fills the entire cavern. In fact, this beast is precisely what created the caverns. Undeterred, the Gears press on. As they head deeper, Carmine has some musings.
One thing I still don't understand. Have the Locusts been down here, like, forever, or what?
This is a great question. The Locusts only appeared 14 years ago on E-Day. Where exactly have they been before that? If they've been underground for eons, what sparked E-Day exactly? For how big and bold Gears 2's storytelling is, moments like these subtly lay the groundwork for revelations to come. The Gears discover a Locust fortification, and they fight through it in search of the Riftworm. They encounter the intimidating Scourge aboard a Hydra. He emits a scream, and he makes a charging gesture with his hand. Moments later, the Riftworm bursts through a cavern wall, following Scourge and his Hydra. This is a great piece of visual storytelling. It informs us that the Riftworm is not a wild beast acting randomly. It is being commanded by Scourge. Naturally, it follows that the Riftworm is doing the Locust's bidding, and that can't be good for humanity. Moments later, Marcus receives word about Alima's destruction.
Roger that, Delta. We've also just received topside confirmation that Alima's city... The entire city has been sunk, right at your position.
Anya! It's a giant worm! They're sinking cities with a giant worm!
Marcus puts together the Locust's plan. They're poking holes around Jacinto, and they plan on sinking the city with the Riftworm. Delta makes their way through the ruined city. The visual storytelling here impresses the stakes of the story upon the player. Here, we see a preview of the consequences if the Riftworm succeeds in sinking Jacinto. Gears 2's storytelling is efficient, leveraging squad dialogue and visual storytelling heavily to bolster the story's moving events. The Gears get pinned by the Locust, but they are rescued by a soldier who can't be mistaken for any other, the Cole Train.
Nobody plays this game like me! Nobody! Cole! In the flesh, baby!
He was separated from Baird and his jumpmate Tanner, and this gives the Gears a new objective. They need to find the missing men. This is another demonstration of Marcus's character. Without hesitation, he cancels extraction to find his men. He prioritizes the safety of individual Gears above all else, and this will continue to be demonstrated throughout the story. At this point, I was overjoyed at Cole's return, and I eagerly awaited reuniting with Baird. Delta just doesn't feel right without them. Carmine and Ty are likable enough, but I think it just goes to show how iconic Baird and Cole are. Their shoes are impossible to fill. The squad soon finds Tanner, but he's already dead. Fortunately, Baird is still alive, and they discover this even before laying eyes on him. His yapping echoes through the prison.
About time! What the hell took you guys so long? You're welcome.
Would he be Baird if he wasn't immediately complaining? Although it's great to be reunited with Baird, his imprisonment is unsettling. Why are the Locusts abducting people and holding them prisoner? It's another piece of the puzzle that doesn't quite fit. The Gears come across a beast barge, a flying creature converted into a ghastly prison. It is such a weird and interesting contraption. This sort of thing is one of the reasons I find Gears of War 2's campaign so captivating. The game really captures a sense of discovery as the Gears head deeper and deeper into Locust territory. There's always something new about the Locusts to be learned, whether it be their torture barges or creepy architecture or so forth. They search the barges for more prisoners. Eventually they find Ty, the spiritual warrior. He lost his battle with Scourge, and he ended up in this cell. His body shows the story of what happened, of the untold terrors the Locusts inflicted upon him. They need to get out, so Marcus hands him a gun. That was a mistake.
Ty! No!
The game's buildup of Ty as an invincible warrior has its payoff here. Even a man such as he can be cut down by the Horde. One of the reasons Gears of War's story is so satisfying is that the game always lays seeds for big plot moments or revelations, even games in advance. Even Marcus the Unshakable is aghast by this. This circles back to his characterization in the game. His men, beyond all else, are his priority, so when something happens to them in particular, it makes sense that it would affect him the most. They head for extraction, and they fend off the LZ as Locusts converge. Fortunately, they make it onto the Raven, seemingly in the nick of time. They are far from the clear though. The Riftworm bursts onto the scene. Carmine falls off the Raven and plummets right into the Riftworm's mouth. The rest of the Gears follow, as the Riftworm consumes them all. An abrupt flashback follows. Dom is in bed, as Maria brings him breakfast. The game has been bleak and brutal, so the peace and joy in this flashback serves as a stark contrast. It's clear that this is all that Dom has ever wanted. By saving Maria, he hopes to have another moment like this someday. This right here is exactly what he's fighting for. Maria's gentle goading of him to wake up is interrupted by Marcus's rough command to do the same. Compared to her, his gravelly voice is like nails on a chalkboard.
Dom! Dom!
Dom, wake up!
It's a rude awakening, and it hurts even more knowing where the Gears are, the belly of a giant worm. Where others might see despair, Marcus sees opportunity.
This is what's sinking the cities. This is our chance to stop it.
And how the hell are we supposed to do that?
Rip its goddamn heart out. Come on, let's move.
There's an undercurrent of rage in his voice. He wants to kill this thing, not only for Jacinto's sake, but also as revenge for his fallen brethren. Ty's death is still so fresh. Another death soon follows. They find the young Carmine, and there's no saving him. His final wish of Marcus telling his family that he loves them is especially painful, since we witnessed the loss of his brother already in the prior game. You wonder just how many more kids this poor family is going to lose. This serves as even more motivation to kill this foul creature. The next segment is one of the weirdest and most interesting in the game. The Gears make their way through the beast in search of its heart, and they have to survive the various workings of its digestive system. Remember back to when I said that Gears 2 nails that feeling of exploration? Well, here's the most extreme example of that. There's hardly any shooting here, yet it remains engaging. Marcus and the gang have to time sprints through grinding teeth, snake their way through toxic intestines before they suffocate, and so forth. It's like a nasty obstacle course. In fact, this prolonged break from shooting does wonders for the game's pacing. The campaign before and afterwards has such tense and frequent gunfights that a midway break serves as a great reset. They cut through the worm's heart, only to discover that it has multiple of them. For a beast so large, it makes sense. The segment ends with the Gears cutting through the worm's remaining hearts, as the space fills with blood. They have to complete the task before drowning. This area naturally is dominated by red, and it demonstrates how Gears 2's color palette has a wider variety than the first title. After the final artery is cut, the worm is vanquished. The immediate threat to Jacinto is quelled, and Marcus radios command.
Control! Delta here. We just... I don't know where to even begin, but just get us the hell out of here.
When Marcus Phoenix of all people is shaken twice in one day, you know that it's been quite the day. Sadly, there's no rest awaiting the Gears. Command immediately dispatches them on another mission. They're ordered to investigate a newly declassified COG outpost, which may contain leads on the Locust stronghold and their queen. The Gears understandably are very sketched out by this order. If Hoffman didn't even know about this place, then what on earth could it contain? The intrigue deepens. As soon as the Riftworm subplot ended, the story immediately creates new suspense with this mystery outpost. Gears 2's pacing with its plot manages to create this unrelenting, ever-racing feel, which is apt given the stakes of the story. A heavy thunderstorm rumbles as the Gears roll up to the facility. The thunder adds to the creepy atmosphere this decrepit compound instills. Up until now, Gears of War has adopted a more action-oriented tone than its predecessor. The color palette has been brighter and more varied. The focus has been on scale and set pieces rather than leveraging the same horror suspense. This act of the campaign feels like a return to that old tone. Because the rest of the game has been more action-oriented, in some ways it hits even harder due to the contrast. Initially they only encounter some wretches, which is unsettling. The place feels altogether too still. You get the bad feeling that something far worse awaits within. They don't have authorization to get through the front door, so they decide to blow it up.
Welcome back. Do you now have proper identification?
Oh yeah, I got some identification for you.
As I touched on earlier, it's nice to see that despite everything Marcus has endured, he hasn't lost his smarmy sense of humor. It's one of the reasons the guy is so likable and easy to root for. Once they get in, the strange entity at the door introduces itself.
Welcome to the New Hope Research Facility. I'm Niles. Please, let me know if I can be of any assistance.
This Niles' politeness is uncanny, given the decrepit state of the facility. His presence contributes to the creepiness of the level. The Gears become even more suspicious of the Cog, and they wonder what this facility was being used for. Logs around the environment enhance the dread even further, documenting experiments gone wrong and test subjects growing even more violent. The Gears encounter hostile turrets. These make for interesting gameplay encounters, where you have to avoid them while also contending with wretches. Furthermore, the turrets tell us more about this place. These defenses aren't designed to keep prisoners in, rather they're designed to keep people out. It reinforces that the secrets this facility holds are vital for the chairman to contain, even from someone as high up as Hoffman. They come across stasis tanks that contain strange creatures. Evidently they're the test subjects. They're not quite human, nor are they any type of locust we recognize. Things are growing even more bizarre. The Gears find a terminal, and they listen to a recording left by the real Niles. Whatever experiments went on here, Niles believed they were crucial in saving the children, or in other words, saving the future. Given what we've seen, this doesn't quite compute. How could these mangled monsters save humanity? Were they the end goal, or did something go horribly wrong? It appears Niles and the other researchers journeyed to Mount Kadar, taking subjects with them. He left an automated security system modeled after himself to watch over the facility. What happened here is still very unclear, but it appears that Mount Kadar is the next destination in their mission. By powering up the terminal, they also inadvertently unleash the sires from their stasis chambers. The Gears frantically make their escape, fighting these abominable things. The sires aren't too hard of enemies. They're kind of like big wretches, charging you and clawing. However, they're pretty swift, and they come in swarms. What really elevates this segment is the creepy atmosphere that the environment and story have created. It makes the sires feel even more intimidating than the threat they present purely through gameplay. Once they're clear of the sires, they encounter Locust. The Gears battle through them as the thunderstorm evolves into a razor hailstorm. As the name suggests, it's sharp blade-like hail that is deadly with prolonged exposure. The Gears must navigate from shelter to shelter in order to reach the Centaur. This is one of my favorite segments in the game for a few reasons. First off, the razor hail is a very unique weather phenomenon to Serra, yet the Gears don't treat it with much fanfare. It speaks to just how rough of a planet Serra is. Even without the Locust, it can be quite a miserable place to live. It elevates the dour atmosphere of the level, and it adds tension and desperation to the final stretch of their escape. Furthermore, the razor hail is a great environmental hazard, and this segment leverages that to create a handful of really interesting combat encounters. This is another example of how Gears 2 uses set pieces creatively to inject variety into the battles. The Gears journey to Mount Kadar and the Centaur. This is a pretty long vehicle segment that serves as a break from normal gameplay, just like the Riftworm segment. As I mentioned, the pacing of these breaks throughout the campaign is really well done. With that said, I'm not the biggest fan of the Centaur section. The Centaur is super clunky to navigate. It turns slowly, and any finer movements become frustrating. Since the Centaur is a tank, this would be fair enough. However, there are multiple segments where you have to cross icy lakes while locusts are blowing holes in it. This requires two things. Quick reactions because the ice holes can suddenly appear just a couple feet in front of the tank. Also, it requires precise movement because the safe path can be relatively narrow. The tank is pretty bad at both quick and precise movement, and there were multiple times where a hole was blown right in front of my path, and I couldn't slow down in time to avoid it. These sections are frustrating experiments in trial and error. Fortunately, this segment of the game is very generous with its checkpoints, and this alleviates the frustration significantly. This all isn't to say the Centaur segment doesn't have things going for it. It's very cinematic, and it successfully captures the urgency of your mission. You feel the buildup of the story in real time as Delta approaches Mount Kadar. There's even a great moment where you come across a broken bridge, and you have to jump the gap from the nearby woods. They enter Mount Kadar, weaving through a cave network as they try to locate the Locust stronghold. Here, there are some great moments with Brumax and Corpsers, and the game uses the darkness expertly to create tension. The Gears encounter a surprisingly familiar face. There is a group of stranded led by Chap, the gas station guy from the first game. He's still bitter about what happened at his gas station, which is honestly fair.
What the hell are you doing down here?
Well, after you jackasses blew up my station and Franklin's outpost got overrun, the surface wasn't safe no more.
He points them towards the Nexus, the place that the Locusts come from. Marcus makes a decision.
Cole, Baird, I want you to take these people up to the surface. Dom and I will continue on foot.
What? But
they're gonna die otherwise.
This is another demonstration of his character. He always prioritizes the safety of individuals, even at the cost of the mission. Marcus is putting himself and Dom in significantly more jeopardy along with the mission by diverting his men to help with the stranded. Yet he does so anyway, for the very simple reason that the stranded will die otherwise. His kindness to these strangers shows that despite his callousness and despite his gruffness, there's a very caring heart that lies within him. And it's this contrast between his exterior nature and the kindness of his actions which makes him so compelling. The stranded are skeptical. They don't want to be conscripted, like Dizzy was. Their fear of the Cog is even more understandable after we witness the foul experiments in the secret lab. Marcus promises them safety, and with everything settled, he and Dom head for the Nexus. The view of the caverns is pretty incredible. They seem to stretch on for miles and miles. It makes you wonder just how many locusts could be lurking within this Nexus. They have to cross the lake, so they head for a docked boat. The locusts destroy it, but that doesn't deter the gears. They ride across the lake on the detached dock and eventually pirate a locust gunboat. All the while, they're fending off locusts. It's a cool gameplay segment. The movement of the waves throws off your aim, and it gives a different feel to the shooting. During this segment, the gears encounter emulsion fumes, and the locusts abruptly stop pursuing them. It's odd to see the locust afraid of anything, and this is laying the narrative seeds for a revelation later. The boat segment ends with a fight against a giant locust monster. It's a pretty simple fight, just consisting of shooting its tentacles and lobbing a grenade down its throat, but it's cinematic and a good way to cap off the segment. They reach a road leading to the Nexus. It's very ominous. Tense music plays, and reddish-yellow smoke adds to the dangerous atmosphere. It uses the same visual motifs as the Emulsion mine from Gears 1. The stalagmites and stalactites are jagged, and they're arranged to look like teeth. We are descending into the jaws of the beast. They go through a passage, and on the other side, the cavern expands to a truly breathtaking size. I know I've mentioned it many times, but scale is such a huge part of Gears 2's visual language. They encounter a large movement of Locust troops. Dom figures that the road leads to the Nexus, and Marcus wants to follow them. Dom has other plans.
Wait, Marcus. The old guy said we had to branch off the highway at the dam.
Look, we need to stick to the mission. We have no idea if Maria's down here, and
I need to know. You don't have to go with me, all right?
Damn it. That's just gonna get us both killed. We need to get into the stronghold and activate the beacon. This is it, Dom. This is everything we've been fighting for.
Yeah? Well, Maria's everything I've been fighting for. She's my fucking wife, all right?
So you gonna turn your back on your whole world, then? The other Gears we fought with? All the people who've died?
I'm sorry, Marcus. After what you did for your father, I thought you'd understand.
Ah, hell. Dom, wait up.
This scene, perhaps more than any other in the game, exemplifies Marcus's character and his priorities. He knows their mission is critical to the survival of humanity. He knows it's much more important than finding Dom's wife. Yet he knows that Dom's determination is unshakable. Marcus won't abandon a friend, under any circumstances, even if it means leaving the world in jeopardy. Loyalty is his most powerful virtue. They discover human labor camps. Slaves are grinding away with pickaxes. It appears that locusts have been abducting humans for labor. That puts the immense scale of the Locust stronghold in a different light. It makes you wonder just how much of it was constructed by human hands. I really enjoyed exploring the Nexus because the environment gives us a glimpse of Locust culture. The buildings are adorned with tons of decorations in the form of glyphs and patterns. It's crude, yet this artistry nonetheless speaks to a greater sophistication than one would have assumed. Likewise, they have technology like floodgates, elevators, and so forth. The environmental storytelling subtly hints that perhaps the Locusts aren't quite as different from the humans as we thought. Dom and Marcus find a computer terminal, and Dom searches up Maria. He finds her in the Locust database, and she appears to be somewhere signified by a glyph. They reach a cavern filled to the brim with cages, much like the one Baird had been trapped in. The extent of the Locust kidnappings is disturbing. The unsettling feeling is amplified by the sounds of human groans as you pass by the cages. Furthermore, the dread builds, as these sights don't bode well for Maria. They push through area after area, searching for this specific glyph. Once they find it, they comb through the cages. At long last, Dom reunites with his wife.
Maria.
Dom.
Oh no. No. No, baby. No. What did they do to you? I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, Maria. I tried to find you. God, I did. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do, man.
No. It's okay.
His outburst of confusion and despair is what truly makes this scene work. He's been a man with a singular mission throughout the entire game. His purpose has been to find his wife. Now that he's found her like this, his entire world is torn apart. He has no ground underneath him anymore, and he panics, seeking solace from the friend who's always been steadfast. The scene captures a very human mix of emotions, and that is what makes it ring authentically. Marcus gives Dom time to process his grief, at least as much as he can afford in the situation. Once Dom is ready to move, he, Marcus, and the player are all aligned in motivation.
I want to kill them all.
They fight through hordes of the enemy, and there's a certain catharsis in Dom getting immediate revenge, at least in small doses. However, it feels a bit strange that Marcus and Dom can fight single-handedly through the Locust stronghold. Why are they running only into small squads of Locusts instead of a massive force converging on them? The Queen even encourages her soldiers not to give up.
Keep fighting, my children. Your queen is with you. They can be stopped. Don't give in.
Why would she have to encourage her soldiers when they're fighting two lone gears? With how big of a threat the Locusts have been throughout the series, it doesn't feel right. They find a place to call in reinforcements, and Delta is finally reunited. Together they make for the palace, hunting the Queen. They stumble across an unexpected fight. The Locusts are shooting at each other. The Queen's army is fighting against the Lambent, which are Locusts afflicted by an infection. We saw Lambent variants of wretches in the first game, but it appears that the sickness can go beyond them.
The Lambent are inferior. The plague must be stopped.
This makes all the oddities within the stronghold begin to make sense. Even Baird was wondering why they were doing so well. Delta's only been fighting small squads, and thus making headway, because the Locust's attention is split between them and the Lambent. The Queen's encouragement wasn't directed towards the battle against a few puny humans. Rather, she was encouraging her troops as they fought the Lambent. Marcus has a revelation.
They're desperate. All this time, we never realized that.
The Locusts are desperate. This harkens back all the way to the beginning of the game, when the Locusts were raiding the hospital in a suicide run. Cole gets a hold of the loudspeaker system, and he has some choice words for the Locust. This is a pretty hilarious moment, and it's a reminder of how great Gears' supporting cast is. This game has such a focus on Dom and Marcus, and I do wish Baird and Cole would have been given slightly more screen time. Jack taps into a computer terminal, and the squad uncovers new revelations.
If we were to sink Jacinto, it would flood the hollow with seawater. Nothing below would survive. We could end the war today, but only if we sacrifice our last possible refuge.
Who's that talking?
Adam Phoenix.
It's my father.
The first game established a mystery around Adam Phoenix, and the intrigue only builds here. Why is Adam Phoenix so integrated into the Locust system? Unfortunately, the Gears don't have the luxury of pondering this. The Queen wants to sink Jacinto, not only to eliminate the humans, but also to destroy the Lambent. Ironically, Marcus proposes the same plan, only they want to sink Jacinto before the Locusts evacuate. The other Gears are skeptical. With that, they return to Plan A, finding the Queen. After some more fighting, they do just that. At last, they have an audience with the Queen. To the Gears' surprise, she is very human looking, attractive even. This adds even more intrigue to the Locust. Like the architectural and cultural complexity of the city, her humanity implies that the Locusts are more complicated than they originally seemed. There is some unexplained history behind them, and it all seems tied to Adam Phoenix somehow. In fact, she knows Adam Phoenix personally and even seems to have respect for him.
Tell me, is it true? You're the son of Adam Phoenix.
What's it to you?
He spoke highly of you. It's a shame that you didn't follow his path.
The hell are you talking about?
It no longer matters.
These are really compelling questions, but the game doesn't delve into them. Instead, these questions are being teed up for the third game. Just like Gears 1, the sequel has the patience to lay ample narrative ground for the next installment to explore. The Queen leaves Scourge to kill them. Thus begins a boss fight. It's somewhat reminiscent to Ram, fighting a Locust warrior, known for his intimidation and power. The Scourge fight is fairly simple. You just have to dodge out of the way as he drops pillars onto you, and win chainsaw duels when he lunges. Overall though, I'd say that it's an improvement over Ram. It's definitely not frustrating, which is a win. Boss fights have never really been the series' strength, so I'm not being super hard on it. Scourge boards his Hydra and departs. The Gears need to find their way out quickly. Time is running out. They need to sink Jacinto before the Locust can react. They find some Reavers and ride them out. They come across Gears being overwhelmed by Locust. Despite the urgency of their mission, Marcus delays it to help his fellow soldiers. To him, it's not even a question. This is yet another example where the game is demonstrating Marcus's priorities. The pacing of this escape is incredible. It captures a pulse-pounding franticness, especially when the Hydra emerges within the dark caverns. It keeps lurching forward, poised to eat the Gears, and only a properly aimed barrage of gunfire keeps it at bay. They breach the surface and race to Jacinto, all while the Hydra and accompanying Reavers give chase. Eventually they manage to take them all down, including the Hydra. When the massive beast falls, Scourge collides with the rocks and dies instantly. It's a bit of an anticlimactic death, given how much the game built him up. However, on the human side, Ty was built up as invincible and didn't go out in a blaze of glory, so I suppose it's payback. It feels just in a way. They reach Jacinto and regroup with Control. Hoffman and Anya give them a status update.
We've evacuated most of Jacinto, but we still need more time to evac Gears from the Hollow.
Do we have a plan to sink Jacinto?
Almost. We're finalizing the logistics now.
The defense of Jacinto is epic. The game keeps up the same pressure and tempo as the chase scene, and you feel like you're on an absolute ride as the conclusion approaches. With how big, cinematic, and fast-paced Gears 2 has been ever since the beginning, it would have been easy for the game to drop the ball in its final act and deliver something that felt underwhelming in comparison. However, the campaign somehow continues to ramp up, and it delivers a final act that feels truly worthy of the rest of the game. When the immediate threat is dealt with, Delta reconvenes with Control.
We've identified an underground cavern near the Locust sinkhole. We believe that a strategically placed light mass bomb can give Jacinto its final push.
What's the catch?
Due to Cedar and Nemesis infestation, we're unable to get a chopper down there to deliver the bomb. We need someone to clear the target area.
And by someone, you mean us. Baird, Cole, I want you two to assist with the light mass bomb. Dom, looks like we're heading back underground.
On the way, there's a really good courtyard fight. The design of it is more in the Gears 1 style that I described earlier. It's circular with many paths that the Locust can navigate. It gives ample room for wretches and tickers to flank and catch you off guard, forcing you to move. Overall, it's a very dynamic battle. It makes me wish for even more encounters like this throughout the game. They push through more forces and engage in some heavy street fighting. They get their hands on a Hammer of Dawn, the awesome satellite laser from the first title. And while it's a lot of fun, it's hard not to enjoy using it. When they reach the sinkhole, a truly apocalyptic sight greets them. The city is blanketed in smoke. The imagery is a reminder of what's at stake. The entire world will fall if Marcus and Dom fail. They descend into the sinkhole, and there's some pretty creative combat segments here. Locust use grappling hooks to climb onto the roofs, and therefore they can appear from unexpected angles. In fact, the mechanic is akin to the emergence holes. It provides the Locust a way to spawn pretty much anywhere. They come across a Brumac, which blows out the building they're in. However, the Gears use the wreckage to their advantage, flanking the Brumac. They kill the pilot, but before killing the Brumac, Marcus has an idea.
Well, we could ride it. Speed this whole operation up.
Reavers were one thing, but a Brumac?
They can ride them, so can we.
Honestly, with all the beasts that Marcus and Dom have piloted, they're pretty much honorary Locusts at this point.
Delta here. We've hijacked a Brumach so that we can... What? We're riding a Brumach. We're gonna use it to clear the area faster.
Okay. Watch that Delta, keep us posted. Control out.
It's so funny to me how Anya just accepts that they've hijacked a Brumach. With all of the insane stunts Marcus has pulled off, I get why she would start to just take everything in stride. Their Brumach section is fun. The rocket salvo and the machine guns feel really powerful to use, and this segment feels like the turning point in the fight. I will say that this segment does stretch a little too long though, and it starts to overstay its welcome by the end. They destroy the cavern ceiling, giving the Ravens an opening to deliver the light mass bomb. They fly in to get Marcus and Dom off the Brumach. However, the beast steps into Emulsion and goes berserk. It swats the Raven down, destroying the light mass bomb with it. Fortunately at least, Baird and Cole are in the other Raven. They pick up Marcus and Dom, and they try to figure out how to salvage the situation. They realize the Brumach isn't just going berserk, it's going Lambent. It seems the Emulsion has a transformative effect on Locust. The game built up this revelation well. We saw hints of this, for example, when the Locust gave up chasing Marcus and Dom because they entered Emulsion fumes. Just like the Lambent wretches, Marcus figures the Brumach will explode given the proper nudge.
Lambent? Is it exploding Lambent? Yeah, like the wretches, but way bigger. Then I think we've got our bomb.
He hits the Brumach with the Hammer of Dawn, causing the beast to go critical. They escape, flying as fast as they can to get out of the blast radius. Jacinto crumbles, and the hollow floods, just as the Gears planned. We see Locust fleeing, but they're unable to escape the floodwater. Humanity has won this day, albeit at a great cost. Their last refuge has fallen. Marcus's first thought upon witnessing the destruction is to contact Control. When Anya doesn't pick up, despair seeps into his voice and he uses her name.
Anya, come in! Anya!
All that you held dear, all that you held close, is washed away into the sea of distant memory.
I'm sorry, Marcus.
This scene is another piece of characterization for Marcus. It strongly implies that he has feelings for Anya. By the way that Dom comforts Marcus afterwards, it's clear that he knows of Marcus's feelings too. However, there's one bright spot this day. Anya emerges from the other helicopter and waves to them. Marcus's gruff mask immediately lifts back up. He doesn't even wave to her. Whatever feelings he has, he's going to stuff them all the way down until this war is concluded. During this segment, the Locust Queen gives a final speech. She speaks of great loss and tragedy, something that both the Locust and humanity can relate to. However, the end of her speech takes a turn. She speaks of legacy and how it's easy to leave behind one that isn't intended. It's a very mysterious and ominous way to end the game. It alludes to the mysteries of the past, namely Marcus's father, and the Locust history. It's a reminder that this story isn't over, not yet, and I think it's the perfect way to conclude the second chapter of this trilogy. With that, we've reached the end of the campaign. Let's pull everything together. Gears of War 2 had the daunting task of following up a generational game. Somehow, Gears 2 managed to succeed with flying colors. The plot is fast-paced, and it's gripping from the start to end. The story works superbly as the middle installment in the series. More of the world is explored, and there's a true sense of discovery moving from act to act. Questions from the first game are expanded upon, such as the mystery surrounding Marcus's father, yet these questions aren't fully answered. Rather, even more narrative seeds are planted for the trilogy's conclusion. Marcus and Dom have great characterization, and they're explored with more nuance. Dom's search for his wife is the heart of the story, while Marcus's more subtle characterization demonstrated through his actions serves to make him an even more compelling protagonist to root for. I do wish Baird and Cole would have had more screen time, but that is more so a testament to how likable they are rather than a fault of the game. The gameplay improvements are vast. The formula is both refined and expanded upon, with improvements ranging from allied behavior to enemy variety. Because of this almost universal improvement, Gears 2 truly lives up to being a sequel. It's bigger and bolder in all the best ways. However, with all of that said, there are still unique things to appreciate about Gears 1. Gears of War 2 moves in a more action-oriented direction, with a greater focus on adventure and less on instilling tension and fear. The color palette has been expanded, and it looks more visually pleasing, but it loses out slightly on the grimness of Gears 1. The encounter design too has changed to be more linear. Still, these are more preference things than true criticisms. Gears 2 is a monumental achievement, that follows up another monumental achievement. I think you could make a compelling argument that it's the finest game Xbox has released. There are of course other contenders. Gears 2 had a high bar to reach, and it did so incredibly. What that means though is that Gears of War 3, the conclusion to this epic trilogy, had an even higher bar to reach. Can Gears 3 give the series the conclusion it deserves? The final entry in a trilogy is the hardest to pull off. All of the prior build-up needs to be paid off in a satisfying manner, and the stakes always have to be raised from whatever bar the second entry establishes. These are daunting tasks, and it's no shock that so many trilogy conclusions crumble under the weight hoisted upon them. Even so, few games had such a weight put on them as Gears of War 3. The first game in the series created a world of intrigue, with so many questions about its characters and world left unanswered. How did Marcus Phoenix end up in prison? What happened to Marcus's father? And what caused Ide? Gears 2 focused on deepening these questions rather than answering them. We learned that Adam Phoenix personally knew Queen Mira. The Locust seemed to have even more secrets than initially thought. This suspense in Gears 2 paid off. By the end of the game, the audience is at the edge of its collective seat. Investment in the narrative couldn't be higher. The questions by the end of Gears 2 were burning bright. Marinating these questions in Gears 2, however, means that there's even more weight on Gears 3 to not only finally answer them, but also weave them into a narrative that is compelling in its own right. Furthermore, Gears 2 made giant strides in its gameplay, with expansions and refinements that made the first game, as brilliant as it plays, almost feel obsolete in comparison. Gears 3 had to take that baton and continue running with it. So Gears of War 3 had to deliver on multiple fronts. The prior games had set up so many ways for Gears 3 to succeed, but also to fail. Did Gears of War 3 manage to live up to the great burden of concluding this trilogy? Is the ending as epic, both in story and gameplay, as the series deserves? Well, that's what we're going to cover. We're going to go over Gears 3's campaign, and break down its storytelling, world building, and gameplay. Finally, we'll answer the question, is Gears of War 3 the conclusion this trilogy deserved? Grab your Lancer, because we're diving back into the grub hole, one last time. Gears of War 3 opens with a shot of creepy monsters crawling across a ceiling grate. Marcus is in prison, and someone comes to let him out. This start mirrors the opening of Gears 1. Small details like this create a nice full circle feeling. We're back to this same war for one final adventure. But the presence of Anya instead of Dom indicates that things are different this time. The war has evolved since our first humble breakout. It's apparent that this sequence is a nightmare that Marcus is trapped in. He follows Anya, and the scene swiftly develops into a battle at the Phoenix estate. However, this isn't just any battle. This is the day that Marcus lost his father.
He tried to save his work. I tried to save him. I disobeyed orders to do it. That cost us the battle. Couldn't blame them for court-martialing me, or for the life sentence.
Here, we get our first big revelation in the game. We finally learn why Marcus was imprisoned in the first game. He disobeyed direct orders in order to rescue his father. As a result, they lost the battle. Marcus's imprisonment has been one of the series' long-simmering questions. Less than 5 minutes into Gears 3, we're given an answer. This scene sets the tone and expectations for the story. Gears 3 is the game that plans on delivering upon the series' build-up. The revelations are going to continue coming. After watching his father die again, Marcus awakens to a summons aboard the Sovereign, a ship that serves as one of the COG's last refuges. Marcus heads out to fetch Dom. There is a lot to discover while wandering through the ship. There are collectibles that add more backstory, such as a psych report on Dom that illuminates his mental state after losing Maria. This game takes place 2 years after sinking Jacinto. Dom is surviving the best he can, but there is no true recovery after what he's been through. He's taken up growing radishes in his free time. There are also small details like a thrashball game. I love little world building elements like this. They help flesh out the world, adding more dimension and believability. Life aboard the Sovereign seems to oscillate between great boredom and fearful violence. It makes sense that they would have a game based on their beloved sport to occupy themselves. Marcus and Dom come across Jace, who is trying to shake out a candy bar from a vending machine. He's willing to risk sickness just for a taste of the old world. Like the thrashball game, it's a way of reclaiming just a sliver of what they've lost. They reach Anya, and she looks different than when we last saw her 2 years ago. Previously, she was in a more command and intel-based role, but now she's decked out in armor. She doesn't look out of place amongst Marcus or his crew. This change, I think, underscores the general changes that the COG has undergone. There's been a broad flattening of the command structure. Before you had those who commanded and those who fought. Humanity can't afford the distinction anymore. Now everybody fights. Well, almost everybody. Anya brings news that Chairman Prescott is back from the dead and set to arrive on the Sovereign. The same chairman that gave the inspiring speech to the COG ended up turning tail and fleeing. What a great leader he turned out to be. His disappearance and his reappearance are strange. Gears 3 isn't content with merely answering questions set up by its predecessors. No, Gears 3 has narrative intrigue of its own to spin. The intrigue will have to wait, because the Gears have more pressing matters to attend to. Lambent attacked the ship, and the Gears have to fight to fend them off. It's evident that the Lambent have evolved a fair bit since we last saw them. In Gears 2, the Lambent infection jumped from wretches to infect drones, and in the game's finale, a Brumach became infected. In Gears 3, it appears that no Locust variant has been spared from the infection. New polyps scuttle in hordes, eager to attack humans and infect Locust. Giant stalks burst from the ocean's surface. All of this establishes how much the Lambent threat has grown. Initially, they were merely the Locust problem, but the infection has become an existential threat to humanity as well. The new gameplay challenge of the Lambent, as well as the sheer scale of the stalks, do a good job of relaying this existential threat to the player rather than having to rely on exposition. The player intuits the threat they present, if that makes sense. It's a good form of storytelling. They clear an LZ for Prescott. He steps off the chopper all smug and smarmy, which only further intensifies the Gears' anger towards him. He does arrive bearing a gift from Marcus though. It's a drive with something of interest to Marcus, although Prescott doesn't elaborate what. This adds another layer to the intrigue surrounding the chairman's mysterious arrival. The chairman heads off to meet with the captain. After fighting off more locusts, Marcus finally gets to preview the contents of the drive. It's a message from none other than his father.
I'm being held prisoner by the Locust. I've developed a solution for the Lambent problem. They think they can use it to kill humans as well, but they don't realize...
Marcus, he knows about the Lambent. And he looks older than
when we saw him die. I know. If he's still alive, I've got to find him.
Adam's revelations introduce a whole host of questions. Why hasn't he revealed himself to Marcus earlier? It's clear that he wanted to tell Marcus, but he hasn't been able to. Is that the COG's doing? This tape also rekindles questions about the relationship we know exists between Queen Mira and Adam. Why did she single out Adam for help out of all humans? His revelation ends with a sense of urgency. The emulsion, the fuel which humanity has long fought and died over, is killing the planet. They need to act, otherwise the whole planet will undoubtedly be lost, for both humans and locusts. Adam's revelations are a great narrative hook for the player, and the emulsion's threat provides a good drive for the story. We want to find answers to the questions, and we know if we don't find Adam in a timely manner, the entire world will reap the consequences. This is all gearing up for a high-stakes, rapidly moving plot. The tape cuts out, and they need Baird's help to get the rest of the transmission. Either way, they're pulled away from the tape as another wave of Lambent attack. Prescott cries out for help. He's trapped with the wounded captain. Phoenix and his allies arrive in time to save Prescott, but not the captain. Marcus wants to have a little talk with the chairman, but their escape helicopters are under attack. After some tough fighting, an even greater threat is revealed. A Lambent Leviathan attacks the ship. The Leviathan was the monster lurking in the lake leading to the Locust stronghold. Seeing such a beast fall to the Lambent infection is another indicator of just how pervasive and dangerous the infection has become. The Gears fend it off with silverbacks, but they can't defeat the Leviathan themselves. Fortunately, Baird and Cole arrive to the rescue, or at least they try to.
Baird's dropping tickers! What the hell's he thinking? Run!
Perhaps this isn't Baird's most enlightened idea. The Gears desperately run to escape the doomed ship. All of a sudden, the story has a 1-hour jump backwards in time. We now take the shoes of Cole, and he's joined by Baird, Sam, and Carmine. This time jump is pretty jarring, especially for the Gears series, which up until now has pretty consistently told their campaigns in a linear manner. It also derails the narrative excitement drummed up by the plot and explosive set-piece finale. The player now finds themselves in a calm, quiet field of rustling grass. We get to see how Cole and his allies acquired the tickers that they used to bomb the Leviathan. Initially, the prospect doesn't sound all that exciting, and it doesn't seem worth pulling the player away from the main plot to explore the side track. However, by the end, I think this section is more than worth its inclusion in the game. One of my regrets about Gears 2 was that Baird and Cole didn't get much screen time. While here in Gears 3, they get an entire segment dedicated to them, and it's some of my favorite character work in the series. Their squad has traveled to Hanover to search for supplies. This is a prospect that Cole seems excited about. This is his home territory where he used to play professional thrashball. When they land, Lambent stocks surround them. They've ravaged the streets and destroyed buildings, leaving everything in ruin. The beginning chapters of Gears 3 really emphasize the destruction the Lambent have wrought on the world, like with the ocean stocks I mentioned earlier, and this helps sell the threat they present. As the squad travels into the ruined city, Sam and Baird chirp at each other. I really like their dynamic. Sam manages to get under his skin in a way that no other gear can do, and there is something about seeing the Man of Snark getting matched toe-to-toe that I find supremely entertaining. They come across a stranded camp. Famously, the Stranded and Cog don't like nor trust one another, and the tension is strong here. The Stranded don't have anything to trade with them, but they do point the Cog towards another camp that unfortunately lay past Lambent forces. They get moving, and after passing through a garage, Cole encounters an old relic.
Huh. You ever feel like you did, but nobody told you?
This right here encapsulates what this entire segment of the story is about. Cole is facing his old self, what he used to be versus what he is now. He went from the king of the city to just yet another survivor within it. A sense of profound sadness, of hollowness marks his face. However, Cole resumes his upbeat tone and directs the team to keep moving. As they press on, the pronounced destruction becomes personal. You realize what impact this has on Cole. Walking through your home as it's cast in dust and debris is a harrowing experience to say the least. Through it all, he tries to maintain his upbeat attitude, but hints of sadness over the loss peek through. One example of this is apparent when they encounter the Stranded camp at the warehouse and he's recognized.
Hey, you're him, aren't you? You're Augustus Cole. Cole Train! What brings you back here?
Hey, surprised you remember me, baby. Just passing through, looking for food. If you got any to trade, the Cold Trainers sure appreciate that.
All right, come on in.
Surprise you remember me is such a telling reaction. It's not a celebrity's normal reaction to a fan. It reveals how Cole views himself as a relic of a bygone past, one that's been demolished like the rubble that surrounds them. He's excited when talking to her, but there's a slightly forced nature to his tone. The Stranded escort says that Hanover is still Cole's town, but it doesn't feel like it. This is the Lambent's territory now. They head to the stadium, the place that perhaps has the most significance to him. This stadium is what birthed him as the legend to the city. He enters the decrepit locker room, and he can't help but open his old locker. His glory days return to him in a flash of golden light, and he's back to the stadium, back to the cheers of his dedicated fans. Past and present mixed together. Cole has to deliver an explosive payload to destroy the Lambent within the stadium. He charges with the ghostly cheers of his fans to motivate him. He plants the charge, and when it goes off, the cheers suddenly die. Cole has fully returned to the present. The sight of the giant burning stock punctuates that this stadium is a husk of its old self. The imagery and storytelling here really moved me this playthrough, more so than the past. Maybe it's the fact of growing older and having my own days gone by nostalgia for certain things. Either way, what I think really makes this segment work is the contrast within Cole's character. You see the sadness within him for the past, but this doesn't stop him from being his joyful, bumbling self. He's determined to be a beacon of light and positivity in this hellish world, for his old fans as well as humanity itself. And it's that window into his struggles and pain amidst his strength and perseverance, which really makes Cole a heroic figure in this story. His story here is why I said this narrative detour is worth it. I'm big on character work in stories. If you can make people resonate with the characters, then pretty much everything else in the story becomes a bonus. Cole has always been likable, but this subplot adds complexity to his character and humanizes him in a powerful way. They meet with the stranded leader, who is not a big fan of theirs. She plans on evacuating her people, and the Gears decide to take the bridge to meet up with their ship, despite the leader's warning. On the bridge, they encounter Locust. Baird observes that the Locust seem disorganized and feral. It seems that the Locust, like humanity, has grown desperate in these dark days. They hear word about the Leviathan's attack on the Sovereign, and this is when Baird comes up with his brilliant ticker strategy. They fight their way to the ticker storage containers, and they dump one right into the Leviathan's maw. The bridge collapses from the Leviathan's death throes, and Baird and Sam share a touching moment.
I suppose you want me to say I've always loved you. Oh! But I don't. I really, really don't.
Upon waking, they find themselves on the beach, and they immediately set out to find survivors. In short order, they come across Marcus and Dom, and they revive the pair. They're a bit shocked by the news that Marcus bears, but Marcus isn't in the mood to explain.
Prescott? What, do we got an echo here or something? Yeah, Prescott's back, Michelson's dead, and my father's alive. Film at 11.
Honestly, this is fair enough. It's all a big ball of yarn to unravel. Marcus sends Sam and Carmine to help with lifeboats, while the reunited Delta heads to rescue Anya. When they reach her though, they find that it's too late for Prescott. In his dying breaths, he offers some answers to our questions. Adam Phoenix is on a secret research facility called Azura, which has been captured by Mira a few days ago. He hands Marcus a device and says something about encryption, but he dies before he can explain. Baird puts the remaining pieces together.
Hoffman. The bastard is Hoffman.
Spit it out.
Look, Hoffman's been hanging on to that data disk he stole from Prescott back on Vectis. All those goddamn months I spent trying to crack the encryption for him, we still didn't have a friggin' clue what was on it. Well, I bet it's the data on Azura, and that unlocks it. We have to get it to Hoffman and crack that disk.
He's at Anvil Gate. That's a hell of a long journey, Marcus.
So the Gears have their next location. They need to find Hoffman at Anvil's Gate. Locusts attack, and the Gears fight a furious battle to stand their ground. This culminates in a fight against the Brumak, which is a bit boring. Although the fight is cinematic, the Brumak is just a big bullet sponge at the end of the day. They're able to use the data reader to hear the rest of Adam Phoenix's recording. We get an answer to why Adam Phoenix hasn't communicated with his son for so long. It turns out he was abducted from the Phoenix estate on that fateful day by Prescott. This sends Marcus into an understandable rage, but there isn't anything he can do about the past. So far, the story's pacing has been sound. Plot reveals have been doled out steadily, but these reveals are paired with new objectives or questions that add further direction to the narrative. The Gears on their way to Anvil Gate reach the Deadlands. It's a barren, desert-stricken land with little to offer but sand. The Gears plan to capture a beast barge so they can fly to Anvil's Gate instead of hoofing it on foot. They battle their way through heavy concentrations of Locust forces, and this is a very combat-centric segment of the game, so this is a great time to dive more deeply into Gears of War 3's gameplay. The jump in gameplay from Gears 1 to 2 is significant. After playing Gears 2, it's hard to jump right back into playing Gears 1 without it feeling archaic in comparison. Gears 3 has some of the same refinement and expansion from Gears 2, but it doesn't feel like as big of a leap. Gears 2 but more of it is a fairly succinct way to describe Gears 3. It's fair but not exactly complete. There are some changes to the pace of combat. Gears of War 3 is a faster game than its predecessor. I didn't do any extensive testing, but the roadie run feels much faster than in Gears 2. You can dart from cover to cover like a bullet in 3. This speedy philosophy is seen in other areas, such as tweaks to the arsenal. The Gorgon has been converted from a burst fire to fully automatic, and it dishes out better close quarters offensive pressure. The hammer burst has been tweaked in every game, and it sees even more tweaks here, with a new ADS mode. You would think this would make the gun feel slower, but this change actually makes the gun feel much more snappy. Gears 3 doesn't have as many core gameplay changes as Gears 2, but its most significant also contributes to this added sense of speed. You can now vault over cover and kick enemies, which as I'm sure you can imagine adds to the aggression. If an enemy is cowering behind cover, you can punish them, especially if you're wielding a Gnasher. I don't want to overstate the speed adjustment though. It's noticeable, but the game still fundamentally plays like Gears 2. Rather than altering mechanics, Gears 3's real focus lies on expansion. There are a lot of new weapons added to the sandbox. The Retro Lancer and the double barrel shotgun offer different flavors of the existing Lancer and Shotty. There's a new cleaver which feels clunky to use, but does feel satisfying when you hit enemies with it. The one-shot, a new sniper heavy weapon, is amongst the most satisfying weapons I've ever used in a shooter. I would say the Digger Launcher is the most interesting addition. It's a launcher with an explosive round that travels underground before popping up and exploding. It feels like such a perfect weapon for the Locust, given that they are an underground dwelling race. It figures that they have a weapon that loves the underground as much as them. So the raw number of new weapons is comparable to what Gears 2 added, if not more, but the additions don't feel quite as impactful to me. This could simply be a case of diminishing returns. Gears 1 had a small sandbox, so adding a wider arsenal in the sequel had a much wider impact. Gears 2 also had more emphasis on adding entirely new weapon types, like the heavy weapon category, while Gears 3 has a bit more focus on variants like the Retro Lancer. In my opinion, the most significant change that Gears 3 makes to the sandbox is the introduction of the Lambent as a fully fleshed out enemy faction. They're visually distinct from their Locust counterparts with their glowing skin and more mutinous overgrowth. Although the Lambent are infected versions of Locust, they're far from mere reskins. The Lambent drones now explode, which creates a hazard if you're too close to them. Drudges are the evolved version of drones, and they're able to mutate mid-battle to an entirely new form that shoots projectiles at you. The Boomer variants launch arcing explosions at you. Because of the more arcing trajectory, they're able to hit you behind cover more easily, and it forces you to move often. Shooting the Lambent and watching the cascade of explosions is somehow even more satisfying than shooting the Locust. Nonetheless, I don't think they quite reach the same level as fighting the Locust. At this point, the Locust just have so much more enemy variety, and their ranks also expand in Gears 3. The game introduces the Cerapedes and Armored Cantus, and both of these units force you to change your approach. The Armored Cantus are resistant to small arms fire, so your best bet is to save your grenades and boomer shots for when they appear. For the Cerapedes, you have to shoot their rear segments, which makes for a very interesting target. Positioning to shoot them while they're targeting you can be challenging. These additions make the Locust, which already had amazing enemy variety, just that much more interesting. The Locusts too have new weapons to play with. They can also use the Digger Launcher I talked about as well as the Cleavers, so they can force you out of cover and the cleaver-wielding enemies can run you down. Overall, these enemy changes seem targeted at the criticism I had for Gears 2. Too often you could get away with hiding behind the same piece of cover and shooting for a whole fight. In Gears 3, these new additions really force you to move. Explosives from Digger Launchers will force you out of cover, as well as the arcing lobs from Lambent Boomers. Overall, the explosive nature of the Lambent makes it more dangerous to remain stationary in one spot for too long. Although the Lambent may not reach the same level as the Locust, they're fun in their own right and feel different, and that's what truly matters. Their inclusion does wonders for the game's pacing. The campaign is very intentional in how it paces out fights between Lambent and the Locust. The first act of the campaign is pretty much entirely the Lambent, while the second act is almost exclusively the Locust. The game makes sure to swap out which faction you're fighting before any sense of fatigue can set in. It's truly an achievement. Almost every battle in the game, either due to set piece differences or enemy compositions, feels distinct to play, and that's not something many games can claim. The enemy variety in Gears 3 is top of class. I'm not sure there's a shooter campaign out there with more enemy types. The fact that the game so expertly paces this variety is just the cherry on top. To add even more praise, Gears 3 also addresses another complaint I had about Gears 2. In Gears 2, the arena design broadly was a bit too linear for my tastes. Gears 3 opens the combat arenas back up. The campaign still has its own share of linear segments, but it feels like there's more area for you to maneuver, and more importantly, more area for enemies to maneuver and flush you out of cover. The last improvement I want to call out is the improvements to allied AI. In Gears 1 it was bad. In Gears 2 the allied AI was improved but still frustrating. In Gears 3 it feels like the allied AI works how it's supposed to. Allies reliably revived me when it made sense to, and they also only died when it made sense to. I didn't have a moment where they frustrated me, and that is really significant in letting me remain immersed in the story and gunplay. So let's put this all together. With Gears 3's tweaks to combat pacing, its expansion of the sandbox, and the expansion to combat areas, it's the best combat experience to date. With all of that said, how I initially described Gears 3's combat is still correct. Gears 2, but more of it. Although Gears 3 is an improvement, it doesn't make Gears 2 feel archaic like Gears 2 did to Gears 1. Perhaps that's not a fair expectation to put on Gears 3. The bar was already set so high, and if it's not broken, don't fix it, right? Still, I could certainly see how some people could play Gears 3 and feel disappointed that it does feel so similar to 2. For me though, the gameplay does exactly what it's supposed to. There wasn't a point in the campaign where it started to feel like a slog. I love these types of games, but for most of them, there is a point where a slight sense of fatigue hits, so the fact that Gears 3 keeps things so fresh throughout its runtime truly is remarkable. With Gears 3, you get this sense that it's all about sticking the landing. It's all about delivering on the story beats and crafting an experience that is a fitting end to the story. With that in mind, I think a safer approach to combat makes sense. I'll keep touching on specific combat segments throughout the campaign, but that generally wraps up my thoughts on gameplay. So let's get back to the story. It feels like a pretty big pause since we talked about the story, right? Well, I chose to talk about Gears 3's combat at this point to reflect the game's pacing. When the Gears reach the Deadlands, it's pretty much exclusively combat until the second act closes. There aren't really any meaningful developments in the plot. Queen Mira appears, but this isn't a revelation to me as much as it is an expectation. Nobody thought she actually died in the Jacinto flood. Of course she was going to show up eventually. With how quickly the plot moved in the first act, this hour or two pause drags by its end. Don't get me wrong, all of the fights were fun. There is an interesting boss with a corpse or broodmother, which is one of the series' better attempts at a boss. However, I grew impatient for something to happen narrative-wise. The Gears eventually managed to capture their gas barge. This segment does capture the sense of adventure that Gears 2 was so good at conveying. Soaring through the expanse of Deadlands, shooting at enemy barges creates a sense of epicness. The enemy Locusts are attacking a friendly depot, where Dizzy is of all places. They land and defend the barge. Here you get your hands on the famed Hammer of Dawn, and this is one weapon that has tweaks I didn't mention earlier. The hammer now has a limited ammo pool, and it only lasts for a handful of shots. I'm not a fan of this change. The hammer felt like such a powerful weapon, and the true answer to the Locust Horde. Taking away that power makes the weapon feel much less iconic. For a weapon that has such significance in the story, the downgrade doesn't feel warranted. I would have rather they just limited the weapons used to very specific times in the campaigns like the prior games. That seemed to do a good enough job. After they leave the depot, they set sail again to reach Hoffman. The Queen arrives aboard her Tempest though, and she attacks.
You ever get the feeling she's just sticking with us? No, Dom, this feels like a pretty sincere attempt on my life.
The Beast barge is no match for her, and the Gears plunge into a crash landing. They survive the fall, and fortunes smile on them this day. Hoffman himself arrives and rescues them from the wreckage, driving them back to Anvil Gate. Marcus fills Hoffman in on why they've come to him.
Well, Phoenix, I have no goddamn idea what to say. And that's a first for me.
I appreciate how Hoffman's attitude towards Phoenix has changed throughout the series. In the first game, he had nothing but contempt for Phoenix. Now though, it's clear that Hoffman respects him. It's cool that even smaller side characters like Hoffman see character development throughout the series. Before they get to cracking the disc, they need to fend off a Locust attack. It's a very exciting segment. Phoenix fights off his enemy, but they're too numerous, and the Gears get pushed further and further into the heart of the stronghold. It captures the overwhelming force of their opposition. Eventually, Phoenix destroys a fuel tank and kills the current wave of their opposition, granting them a reprieve. It doesn't last, as Phoenix gets word that Sam and Anya are trapped outside the perimeter. You can choose to either rescue them yourself or provide covering fire from the fort walls. Either way, you rescue your allies, but the Lambent Berserker arrives to spoil the party. This is a good variant on a typical Berserker fight. As the Lambent Berserker weakens, it leaks Emulsion, which creates trails that will damage you. It forces you to think more about your positioning so you don't trap yourself. With peace and quiet at last, the Gears finally get their opportunity to decrypt the disc. They learn more about Azura. It's located on an island, but that's not all.
What the hell's a maelstrom barrier?
Some kind of shielding device. Wow, an artificial hurricane around the island. Hey, Prescott was really investing in the crazy tyrant technology.
The only way to get in is via submarine. There's one in an old shipyard, which the Gears can reach by either detouring through Mercy or Char. Mercy has personal significance to Dom.
You sure you want to go there?
What, because it's Maria's hometown? I can handle that now. And we need the fuel.
For how much of a focus Gears 2 had on Dom, he's played a backseat thus far in 3. However, he's about to receive more attention. They make their way to Mercy. Of course, it's far from a smooth ride. After some bumps and bruises, they make it to Maria's old hometown. They enter Mercy to get fuel, but the town is mysteriously empty. While they investigate, Dom reflects briefly on the last time he was here.
So when were you last here, Dom?
15 years. Maria's family, they're buried near the church. I wanted to bury her and the kids here too.
He doesn't complain, but it's clear that being in this town is immensely tough for him. It brings up memories. As they head deeper into the town, the lack of inhabitants becomes even more unsettling. This feeling only worsens when the squad discovers that the emulsion pipelines are rigged. The Gears ready themselves for a potential ambush as they push on. They disable the charges before they eventually encounter their first inhabitant. They find out very quickly that the charges weren't intended for them.
You want to blow this place up?
Yeah! I gotta stop this thing from spreading! Just let me get on with the job!
What thing? You got an epidemic?
How the hell should I know what it is? It's some kind of fever. People started burning up, screaming and fighting, turning crazy. And I'm dead if I'm gonna turn up like that. Like some rabid dog, not even human no more.
You better come with us. We can get you some help.
No, it's too late. Leave me alone.
Hey, come back!
The old man books it, and the Gears pursue him. His words, though, are incredibly troubling, as is his mental state. This whole segment is a great build-up and layering of tension. It's reminiscent of the secret lab segment in Gears 2, although this Mercy section is more focused on pure tension rather than horror. The tonal shift is fitting for Gears 3. Overall, it's a brighter and more colorful game than its predecessors, and the focus has moved even more to pure action than horror. Gears of War 3 is a graphical masterpiece in my opinion. The visuals hold up better today than just about any other game from the Xbox 360 era. Especially with the enhanced visuals on the series systems, I wouldn't blink about this game being a release in the current day. With a broadening color palette comes a great variety in locations and the moods and tones they present. However, when you put Gears 3 side by side with its predecessors, especially Gears 1, it's clear that some of the grimness and grittiness has been lost. I'm conflicted about it, because Gears 3 does look so good, but I do miss that sense of unique dread that Gears created sheerly with its reduced color palette. In my opinion, Gears 2 found the perfect middle ground. It's less gray and brown than Gears 1, but it still holds onto the roots of horror that Gears 1 established. However, as I said, this Mercy segment's tension fits perfectly for the tone that Gears 3 is going for. Eventually this buildup has a payoff with a big revelation. The Lambent infection has made the jump to humans. The implications of this are horrifying. The Gears can't dwell on these fears for now. They need to focus on survival. The Lambent humans essentially fight how you would expect zombies to fight in other games. They charge at you mindlessly in big hordes. They're fun to fight because the game wisely knows when to end these fights and not let them overstay their welcome. The Lambent humans are yet another example of Gears 3's amazing variety that I touched on earlier. The squad finds the fuel pump they need.
Dom, we'll deal with the pump.
Thanks, but don't wait for me if anything goes wrong.
Just make it fast.
I absolutely love how much goes unsaid between Marcus and Dom here. Marcus knows that this grave has special significance to Dom, but he doesn't even need to bring it up. By telling Dom that they'll deal with the pump, Dom knows exactly what Marcus is doing. He's acknowledging Dom's pain, and he's giving him the space to grieve, without having to explicitly address it. This is just so perfect for Marcus's character. He's always been far from a touchy-feely guy, but he nonetheless cares deeply for the people in his life. Small, understated moments like these are some of my favorite types of characterization. Dom has time alone with his wife.
Baby, I'm sorry I couldn't bring you home. But you're with the kids now. That's home, yeah? I'll see you all again one day. Look, Marcus is busy saving the world again, so I gotta be there for him. Sleep tight, sweetheart.
At first, I was disappointed about Dom's more backseat role in Gears 3. However, this scene shows what's been going on in his heart. Dom isn't living for himself anymore. He's living for his friend Marcus and helping him to see his mission through. He has no goals or aspirations purely for himself anymore. Once he's done helping Marcus, he's merely awaiting the day he can return to his loved ones. With this in mind, his lack of agency in the story makes a lot of sense. There is no more side story for this man. He's been acting exactly according to his remaining purpose, helping Marcus. It's sad, but it's also touching. This all comes full circle with the finale of the segment. An onslaught of enemies attack as they're fueling the vehicles. The forces, both Lambent and Locust, are overwhelming. They're not gonna make it. When Dom runs out of ammo, he knows what he must do. He charges through enemies and boards one of the vehicles. He charges through a tunnel, and he comes racing back.
I thought it would end like this, huh? Maria?
Dom rams right into the fuel tanker, causing a massive explosion which creates an opening for his friends to escape. Marcus crawls towards the flames, desperately wanting to pull his friend out, but Anya knows that Dom had no chance.
Marcus! He's gone! He's gone! There's nothing you can do! Stop
Get
it!
off me! God damn it! Let me get him out of there!
As I mentioned, Dom's death brings his arc to a close in a full circle. He was only living to help his friends, but he truly wanted to reunite with his family. His sacrifice lets him achieve his purpose while also granting his wish. He grants his friends the opportunity they need to carry on their mission, while he finally gets to see Maria again. It's a sad ending, but it also feels like this is the exact sort of ending that Dom wanted. What better way to go out than helping his best friend? This in no way makes his death any less painful for his loved ones. When they reach Char, the ground zero of the Hammer of Dawn strikes, Marcus finds the strength to carry on.
He's dead, but he saved us, so we'll make sure he didn't die for nothing.
He knows his friend's sacrifice bought them an opportunity, and they need to succeed in order to make the sacrifice mean something. This motivation powers Marcus through the rest of the story, and it lets him find his footing amidst his grief. They make their way through Char, reckoning with the destruction. The ashen bodies of victims remain, frozen at the moments of their deaths. Their forms, cowering and holding close to their loved ones, captures the horror of that fateful day. They encounter a survivor who has laid out a litany of traps for them. Sam tries to convince them to talk, but the survivor doesn't listen. The Cog clearly are not welcome in these parts. They come across a survivor camp right when Lambent stocks arrive. The Gears help defend the inhabitants, which grants them just enough goodwill to be let in. The inhabitant that tried to kill them with traps summarizes their disdain for the Gears pretty well.
Great view from up here, Cog. You can see the mess he made of the city. Folks around here haven't forgotten the hammer strikes.
Their chief is Griffin, the former head of the Griffin Emulsion Corporation. The inhabitant leads the Gears to him. They hope to strike some sort of deal for fuel. If the Gears hope that Griffin would have a better opinion of the Cog, well, they're out of luck. Griffin hates the Gears just about more than anyone else. Still, he makes a deal with them. If they retrieve his fuel and cable car, he'll let them keep some of it. However, there is a catch.
God damn it, get your hands off me! Marcus! They jumped me and took the truck!
Every contract has a performance guarantee, Phoenix. Your associate is now mine.
Don't you lay a finger on him.
The fact that Griffin went to such lengths just to make sure the Gears held up their end of the deal shows how deep his distrust for the Cog goes. This entire segment of Char helps hammer home, pun intended, the reason why the Cog are hated by so many. Throughout the series, we've been witness to people's dislike and fear of the Cog through groups like the Stranded. Despite this, we haven't physically seen a reason for ourselves for this animosity. After all, we've always been in Marcus's point of view, and he and his squad have always been trying to help. We've only seen the good side of the Cog. Walking through Char and beholding the sheer death and destruction makes people's resentment a lot more sympathetic. Anya especially reckons with the destruction.
Yeah, certainly did a thorough job here.
I've never seen a city trash this bad. Damn, it must have been hard to push that button.
It was. I was there.
Shit, Anya. My bad. I ain't meaning like that.
It's okay.
She represents the best of the Cog. She is genuinely concerned with the survival of humanity. However, even when viewing the Cog in the most sympathetic light, the organization is still forced to think of humanity with a broader lens. This city was destroyed to save humanity, but by doing so, they sentenced the inhabitants to hell. Anya has to witness the consequences face to face. I've always appreciated how Gears embraces moral grayness. The Locusts, although evil from humanity's eyes, are just fighting for survival, and the Cog have their own problems, more of which we'll see later. They reach the building where the cable car sits. They try to call an elevator, which I find funny. Given the state of the city, I would not put my life in the hands of some rickety elevator. Either way, it doesn't work, but they find a makeshift elevator outside, one made after the hammer strikes. This shows the ingenuity of Griffin and his survivors. They're making the city livable in their own way. They get to the cable car and ride it back to Griffin's building. Then Queen Mira attacks from aboard her Tempest. It's clear that she's been following Marcus's squad and wants to stop them. The fact that she has such concern for their mission is a positive in some regards. It means there's a chance of succeeding. They race into the tower and fight through Locust. Their main goal now is saving Dizzy. They do so, but Griffin's people have died in the clash. He blames the Cog for this tragedy. In some sense, he's right. Marcus indeed led the Queen here, but Marcus is saving humanity, and he's sick of the lecture.
You and your tower and all this fucking emulsion can go to hell!
His outburst is understandable here. Fresh on the loss of your best friend, it's hard to stomach someone heaping all of their own tragedy upon you. The Gears, now ready with their fuel, head to the dockyards. It's time to find their submarine. Queen Mira anticipates their next move and meets them at the docks. She orders her soldiers to kill Marcus, reiterating both the importance of his mission and also the danger of it. It's a slugfest through the dockyard, but they eventually get a submarine operational and take the plunge. Marcus mans one of the submarine's turrets. He has to shoot mines and automated missile systems that defend Azura, as well as a Leviathan that comes hunting them. This segment is a good break from the traditional shooting, but it's a bit slow. It lasts pretty long and it overstays its welcome by the end. When they finally reach Azura, the sight is disturbing. The water is blood red, with bodies floating within. They step onto the dock, and an automated message plays, warmly greeting them. Chairman Prescott shipped chosen people to this facility, but Queen Mira killed them all. The Gears battle through Mira's forces, and they manage to establish contact with Marcus's dad.
It's good to see you again. Is Dom with you? Wait, how did you get that scar?
Later, Dad. Where are you?
I'm locked in my laboratory in the hotel tower. I need you to get me out so I can deploy the countermeasure. I'm running out of time, Marcus.
We'll deal with the grubs, Dad. Hang in there.
No, I mean the emulsion, the Lambent organism. It's about to reach a critical stage in its life cycle. I've got to destroy it before it matures and wipes out all life on Serra.
You lost me at life cycle.
It's not a fuel, Marcus. It's a living organism. It's turning everything lambent, including us.
It's a parasite. So you can kill it.
Yes, that's it, exactly. Mira wants me to adapt the countermeasure to kill it without harming the Locust, but there's no time left for that.
It's cool how this revelation that the emulsion itself is a parasite has been subtly planted from the very first game. Where did we first run into Lambent wretches? At an emulsion refinement facility. Adam's flurry of questions makes it clear that he's sorely missed Marcus. His separation from his son was indeed forced. Marcus, for his part, remains all business. He wears his gruff mask and focuses on the mission. They battle across the beach, using silverbacks to cut through their foes. The setting is really cool. Marble black clouds furiously whip across the sky, and the lightning is ominous and oppressive. It signals that this battle is far from over. They reach the Maelstrom generator, and Adam gives Marcus instructions on how to shut it down. Marcus's mask starts to slip, and his profound regret is revealed.
Dad, I'm sorry. I should have saved you from all this. God, I tried.
Don't, Marcus, please. I'm the one who needs some forgiveness. I've cost you everything. I can see it.
He's gone, Dad. Dom's gone.
Marcus, I wish I could bring him back. But all I can do is make sure you all have a future. I won't fail you this time. I promise.
From a distance, Marcus and his father are polar opposites. Adam is a scientist with a brilliant mind. Meanwhile, his son is a brawny, stubborn soldier. It's hard to believe they're related. This scene, though, reveals just how similar father and son are. They both carry intense regret, and sorrow over their families runs deep. They both resolve to secure the future for the same reason, to make all of their past shortcomings worth it. The Maelstrom generator's destruction allows Cog forces to reach the island from the air. Baird and Cole arrive, and Marcus has to break the news of Dom's death once more.
You got us this far. Let's finish it.
The scene reinforces just how much of a leader Marcus is. Arguably, Marcus mourns the most out of everyone, yet he's still the one who has to encourage his friends and make sure they're level enough to carry on the mission. It's an immense burden which he bears. They fight their way deeper into Azura, and the sheer opulence at display is offensive. Throughout the campaign, we've seen the hardships that groups live in, whether it be overcrowded ships, patchwork settlements constantly at siege by Lambent, or literally within the ashes and ruins of ravaged cities. Meanwhile, Prescott and his chosen people have been living in obscene luxury and comfort, sequestered on their private island. This area really showcases the corruption of the Cog. It makes the widespread resentment towards them all the more sympathetic. As I mentioned earlier, Gears of War doesn't shy away from painting the Cog in a bad light, casting the organization as morally gray. The battles here are some of the best in the series. They feel frenetic and desperate, matching the story perfectly. The Gears are desperate to save Adam, while the Locusts are desperate to stop him. The fate of their races lie in the outcome. Mira herself arrives and tries to stop him with her Tempest. During this, she makes some puzzling statements.
Marcus! I gave your father nearly 20 years to deal with the Lambent. He will deal with it, but not at my people's expense.
Mira said 20 years. Anyone else here 20 years?
The relationship between Adam and Mira has always been shrouded in mystery, and that is compounded here. Adam knew about the Locust before E-Day. When Delta finally escapes the Queen and reaches Adam, they finally get some answers to these long gestating questions.
If the Emulsion hadn't reached a critical stage, I might have found a way to save the Locust as well, and they could have gone back underground.
Tell me you don't feel sorry for them.
Responsible, not sorry. It's my fault they're here, Marcus. I failed to stop the Emulsion spreading all those years ago. It drove the Locust out of their warrens. I tried to persuade Mira to keep her people underground, but they couldn't. So then...
Wait. Did I hear right? The government knew E-Day was coming, and none of you bothered to warn us?
No, just me. Even Prescott didn't know. Not until much later. I had so many ideas. Just too little time.
Dad, stop this. Come on.
There's a lot to unpack during the segment. It's clear once again how Adam is filled with regret. He's been thinking about everything over and over. He just wants his son to continue forward, freed from the sorts of regrets that he bears. Marcus, for his part, isn't all that interested in the secrets his father has kept. There's also a lot of pain in his voice when he tells Adam to stop reminiscing about the past. He knows his father's sort of torment only brings about more suffering. He doesn't want his father to be endlessly looking back either. Throughout the trilogy, Marcus has always been shown as the sort of man whose main concern is people. He's always concerned, first and foremost, with helping people on the ground in front of him, and he's even willing to prioritize the little man over grander plans to save humanity. In Gears 2, for instance, we saw this multiple times, be it helping Dom in his quest to save Maria, or stopping to save Cog soldiers even when the Locust stronghold was crumbling around them. Really, this moment is just another consistent through line of that characterization. He cares about his father, not his secrets. This moment too finally contains the revelation of Adam's history with Mira. She approached him years before E-Day in the hopes that he could help save her people. He kept this a secret to himself as he tried to find a solution to the Emulsion problem. When he couldn't, it forced the Locusts out of their underground caverns, thus bringing about E-Day in this long war. Between his words, you pick up on the sheer amount of regrets he must have. He thought he could save them himself, so he told nobody else, so humanity was blindsided by the war. Throughout this act of the story, Adam has said he's responsible for so many deaths, and now we see why. How many people died because of his arrogance? I feel like this scene reveals just enough to be satisfying while not diving too deeply into the past. There are a lot of gaps that the player can fill in themselves. They escort Adam onto the rooftop so they can activate his device. It's a measure that should destroy all of the Lambent organisms, even within hosts. Unfortunately, it will kill the Locust too, which is why Mira is so hellbent on stopping them. Baird is very concerned about whether the device will actually work. How did he actually test it? Adam, though, is entirely certain that it will succeed. Queen Mira puts up one last fight to stop them. It's a pretty decent encounter. You mainly have to hide from her blasts, shoot out the weak point of her mouth, and hit her with the Hammer of Dawn. Although it's nothing special gameplay wise, there is a cinematic nature to this fight that makes it feel fitting for the story's climax. After her defeat, Adam finally sets off his device. However, there is one last terrible revelation that awaits.
Professor, you said you tested this. How?
On myself, Damon. I had to see how the emulsion developed over its life cycle. So I injected myself with it to accelerate things. I'm not going to make it.
It's okay. I'll carry you.
Marcus, the emulsion developed faster in me because I forced it to. I had to find out how it reproduced.
What are you talking about? Oh, shit. No, goddammit, I can't lose you again.
I'm glad I was able to see you again, Marcus. Now go and live for me.
Man, this scene makes me feel terrible for Marcus. This guy constantly has been putting humanity on his shoulders, and he's endured untold horrors along the way. He has suffered through so many losses, from losing squad mates like the Carmines to his best friend Dom. When he finally saves humanity and frees it from a war spanning decades, how is he rewarded? Through the death of yet another family member. It feels wrong and totally unjust. I also feel sorrow for Adam Phoenix. Considering how little screen time he had in the game, only appearing in the final act, it's impressive how the game could draw any sort of emotion from his passing. It's really a demonstration of how good this series is at characterization, even when the story only has a limited amount of time to work with a character. The Queen is still alive. She gloats about Adam's death with profound bitterness. Marcus, though, is not in the mood to listen. Her death truly marks the end of the war. We see the effects from Adam's device travel throughout the world, destroying Locust and Lambent alike. Although it's an overall joyful scene, there's a hint of tragedy to it. The Locust just wanted to survive too. We also see Clayton Carmine survive. Since we've seen a member of the Carmine family die in the prior games, it feels fitting that a Carmine finally lives. On Azura, everybody celebrates humanity's victory. Everybody except Marcus. With his loved ones safe, he can finally allow the weight of everything to collapse in on himself. He just lost his father. He just lost Dom. The only emotion he can process is grief.
Marcus, whatever it takes, I'm here.
What's left, Anya? What have we got left now?
Tomorrow, Marcus. We finally got a tomorrow.
In my opinion, this is the perfect way to end the game. Marcus has always been the man that everybody else has relied on. He's always had to hold everyone up. Here at the end, Anya offers to be there to support him. The ending is a mix of both sorrow and hope. The series has always dwelled in moral grayness, where good and bad get intermingled, and it only makes sense that the ending also contains a cluster of emotions. Above the mood this scene elicits, the game ends with a resounding sense of satisfaction. The important mysteries about the world have finally been answered, but there's still enough gaps where the world doesn't feel entirely solved or discovered either. There is still room for imagination, especially with how humanity will pick itself up after the war. Will humanity forge a better path forward, or will the sort of corruption we witness in Azura reign supreme? Will wars between humanity sprout again? The game's closing hours also hit with an emotional punch that adds personal gravity to the situation. In summary, I guess, the ending feels like what the series deserved. Now that we've gone through the entire campaign, let's bring everything together and reflect on how Gears 3 fits with the rest of the series. Concluding a trilogy is always a daunting task. This is especially true for the Gears series. Gears of War 3 had to deliver on all of the build-up from the prior games, while also delivering an experience satisfying in its own right. Did Gears of War 3 do this? Well, I think it's overall a resounding success. Gears of War 3 answers all of the burning questions that the series has created. More so, these revelations are delivered steadily throughout the story. There are big revelations at the beginning, middle, and end, and this pacing creates an electricity around the campaign. There's always a sense that there's another big revelation around the corner if only you push through. Gears 3 also has some of my favorite character work in the series. We finally got more screen time with Baird and Cole, and the character work with Cole is fantastic. His subplot transforms him from a lovable and iconic side character into a complex individual with a host of longing, sadness, and regret that lies beyond his joyous exterior. The story, through all its characterization of Marcus and Adam, makes you resonate with both father and son and mourn Marcus's losses at the end. Dom doesn't get a whole lot of screen time, but it feels fitting for the story, and the narrative delivers punchily in his final moments. The world is built upon, with new interesting locations like Chart and Azura. The game dives more deeply into the resentment humanity feels for the Cog, and Azura is a monument to why this hatred is warranted. The gameplay is the most fun and varied yet, with an entirely new enemy faction, a quicker pace to gunplay, and new weapons to play with. Of course, Gears of War 3 isn't a perfect sequel. Although the game expands on the gameplay formula, it doesn't represent the same sort of leap from Gears 1 to 2. It feels like more Gears 2. Likewise, the more vibrant art direction may not be to everyone's tastes, and the removal of horror elements almost entirely does result in Gears 3 feeling even more action-oriented than its predecessors. Still, these are small quibbles in light of everything that Gears 3 did right. Amongst the landscape of flops and failures that trilogy conclusions often become, Gears 3 stands as a shining example of how to end a trilogy on a high note. Overall, the trilogy is a beacon of consistency, with all three games standing as strong, solid titles. There is a reason this series is still relevant to this day, and a reason people are yearning for E-Day. Even decades later, people still resonate deeply with Marcus and his Delta Squad. Well, we made it! Together, we dove into each game in the original Gears trilogy. I'm really happy I did this retrospective. I've always loved the Gears franchise, but this experience has given me a much deeper appreciation for the games. They have exciting stories and explosive action, but a lot of the legwork that goes into making Gears such a memorable experience is in the quiet moments, and the small bits of world building snuck in between combat segments, and all of the characterization that is weaved so expertly throughout. For me, the Gears trilogy offers the perfect package of ambition, heart, and execution. The trilogy stands as tall today as when it was released, a growing number of years ago. Thanks so much for watching. It means a lot that you made it all the way through this long video. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing, or even leaving a comment. Your interactions significantly help the video in YouTube's eyes, especially for smaller channels like mine, so it would mean a lot. I'd also love hearing your thoughts on the games either way. In addition, I have a link in my bio for my science fiction series, The Northfield Saga. If you like Gears of War's world, I think you'd really resonate with it, so please check it out if you're interested. Seriously, thanks again for watching. Your support really does mean the world. Until next time.